Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the 15th episode of Obscure Image Podcast, the most obscure podcast in the world, where I interview underground artists, YouTubers, gamers, inventors, and anything in between that. Today I have a really dope episode for you guys, man. This is really cool. Usually I find out about people through other people I have interviewed, but this person has been a part of my childhood, so that's how I know about this person. So without further ado, why don't you tell people who you are, what you do, and where you're from?
Hey, thanks for having me. I am Dan Klitsner. I am here actually in Walnut Creek, California today, which is where I was born. And I am a industrial designer and game inventor, and I invented a game called Bop It, among many others. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
That is amazing. So you said you're from Walnut, you said, right?
Walnut Creek, it's kind of about 30 miles outside of San Francisco.
Okay. So how was it like growing up out there?
There were walnuts and creeks in Walnut Creek. It's developed quite a bit since then. Since remember, I invented Bop It 25 years ago, and before that, I had a whole career. So I've been here, it was a while ago,
Mm-hmm.
and Bop It, it wasn't even on my mind when I was here when I was a kid. But I grew up literally running around, a lot of outdoor kind of hills, and I believe now about half of it has been developed into some beautiful homes. And I don't see any walnut orchards here anymore, and not very many creeks. So that's a long answer. You can edit that out if you want.
Oh no, I'm keeping it. That was amazing, man. I'm keeping everything in. But so again, I may ask you questions that you may have already answered in previous podcasts. I'm just gonna lay out the story.
Absolutely.
Um, I want to know, how did you come across wanting to invent stuff? Like, was that something you always wanted to do since a child, or?
Yeah. In fact, strangely enough, here in my childhood home, I'm in my father's home today, and I'm looking out over this cul-de-sac that I grew up in from the time I can remember till through high school. I would go out in that cul-de-sac and play with other kids. And there's a few of the kids there that, as we got older, we started to build tree houses, a lot of outdoor stuff, make things, make a go-kart out of a lawnmower engine. Uh, at some point, one of the kids was into electronic stuff, and I don't know if you know what a Heath kit is, but it was sort of a make your own electronics kit, like where it would give you the parts and it would tell you how to make a radio or a car alarm or things like that. And so we kind of got into that, and I think I just always loved making things, and I liked athletics and sports and sort of being active. So a lot of the things I made were more like that, like outdoor things, or building a fort, things that were using my hands and kind of creating something.
Oh wow, that's really. Have you ever built a treehouse? I always wanted to build a treehouse.
I did. I built a 4-story treehouse in a giant eucalyptus tree in the backyard here where I am today. But that was so many years ago. The tree eventually grew around it and crushed it, and it literally, there's no trace of it. It was this giant treehouse that me and some friends built and had all during high school, and it was there for many years. So yeah, it was an epic treehouse that kind of poetically, just along with my my high school days, got enveloped by this giant tree.
Wow, that's really. Do you have any pictures of it, or?
I don't know if I do. There's probably some picture,
Mm-hmm.
some old picture from high school somewhere, but this is so long before digital that,
Yeah.
I don't know how to find it. But but I drew a lot. I was very artistic. So ceramics, things, just a lot with my hands, and I don't know if I knew that it was inventing, but I liked creating. So I always had an aptitude for that, and I probably drew more than anyone that I know.
Okay, that's pretty cool. I remember hearing in one of your interviews that as an inventor, you have to think as if the idea that you created already exists. So I say that to ask, how difficult is the process of trying to invent something successful?
It's an interesting question, that answer, or that the concept that everything that you invent probably already exists. There's sort of two parts to it. One, a lot of creative people feel this way, musicians, artists, is that the things are already out there. You know, all the ideas are out there floating around, and we all share a lot of inventive thoughts. And it's about tuning into it and sort of pulling it down and noticing what's out there. That if it kind of if an idea comes to you, you have to assume that it's also come to a lot of other people. And it's really about the person that takes the time to then put the work into it and what they do with it and how they execute it. You know, that so I feel that kind of to me explains why ideas are probably out there. But it's also because, you know, we all think relatively alike, and yet, you know, the results are very different. So I think it's one of those things I've noticed over the years, that a lot of people who come up with ideas don't assume that anyone else could have possibly thought of it. And that's their biggest mistake, rather than embracing the idea that probably a lot of people have thought about something similar, and then really push to see what can you do to make your version of it special. That's really all it is.
Wow. So how difficult do you think the process is of trying to create something successful?
Well, it's got a few different parts to it. To be successful, meaning financially successful, is very different, you know, than people just liking your idea. Mm-hmm. You know, you can solve a problem. Many inventions, would you say, you know, are solving a problem? Like, think of something that, you know, I saw someone along, you know, a famous invention, a new type of coat hanger that stopped the clothes from falling off the hanger because it had this special coating on it. You know, that was a problem-solving invention. Versus games are not necessarily solving a problem. They're trying to create entertainment. You know, a little bit like a movie. A movie isn't really solving a problem. It's presenting a story. It's giving you entertainment. It's engaging your mind. You know, so game invention is much more difficult, I believe, than problem-solving invention, because when problem-solving, inventors find something that they need to make a better solution for, you know, engineering solution or you know, word processing, whatever it is, it's an invention that solves a very specific problem. And so, you know, when you've succeeded, if that was your question, how do you create a successful invention? So it's easier to say, well, I've succeeded. I created this invention that solved the problem. Then, of course, financially, it all depends on your marketing. So those are the two parts. Versus game invention, you have to first create something that's new, that could be anything, that's, you know, excites people, that brings them entertainment, that connects them, all the things that a game is for. And then how do you make sure you get it to the right company so that it could be marketed and make you some money eventually? So long answer to, you know, depending on what is the success that you're looking for, you know, it's the creation of the idea is very different sort of part of your process than how then do you make or gauge whether it's successful.
Okay, I actually really like that answer. I feel like industrial design is like a super solid career path. You said you went to school for industrial design. I think now, I don't know if they taught you that in when you went to school for it, but I looked it up and it says it teaches you like from creating design concepts to web design to aesthetics for products, just also marketing, just everything all in one. I was wondering, have you ever thought of like teaching like industrial design, like having an industrial design class?
As a matter of fact, I did teach over the years. I've taught on and off at San Francisco State, Academy of Art, College of CCA, which is College of California College of Arts. So I find I love teaching. It takes time away from my own creating. I seem to have had trouble, you know, balancing the time that I took to teach versus I have so many ideas I always want to work on that I think I felt I couldn't do both. but I do enjoy it and maybe that's part of my fun I'm having right now with social media at Bop It Inventor. I'm using the Bop It name, even though I've done a lot of other inventions, it's sort of drawing people to my pages where I can talk about invention and give some tips and just sort of, teach in a sort of a fun way. Mm-hmm. So I do love sharing that information. But one thing about industrial design I wanted to mention is that, did you know what it was before you looked it up?
No, I've never heard of industrial design, so I looked you up.
So this is a really interesting issue. Maybe you've heard product design or other words like that. But here's how I explain what industrial design is to third graders, because sometimes I'll go and I'll give talks to schools about toy invention, industrial design, because, well, I think that for people who end up going into industrial design, very commonly, if they hadn't have found it, they would have been really miserable. It sort of fits a very specific kind of person. So that was what I was. In high school, I drew a lot. Like I told you, I tried to create things. I didn't quite know what it was. So I was put into an engineering background. I went to UC Davis and I really hated it. I knew it was more about the technical side, but not about the things about creating a product and the actual use of it and the way it looks and the way it feels. I was much more into the tactile side of things. So when I finally found out what art center, I went to the school called Art Center College of Design in Pasadena. When I looked and opened this brochure from the school, I didn't know what industrial design was either. And when I saw it, I saw pictures of, like beautiful vases that someone had done, or a campfire special kit for lighting your campfire. These were just student projects I remember from the catalog, or a new type of bicycle, or a car steering wheel, or, I'm just visualizing the things that I saw. And I got more and more excited. I got so excited looking at this. And I was like, that's what I want to do. I didn't know what that was, but that's it. I want to create things. And I want to not do just the engineering on them. I want to do the product. So I later, as I loved school and went out and ended up doing lots of different types of design, from bottles to remote controls to computer stuff and toys, was one of the things I was working on, and obviously eventually specialized in toys. But there's one question you can ask someone, or you can explain what industrial design is by saying what it isn't. So if I ask you, or a group of third graders, what do architects design? What would your answer be?
Homes, buildings.
Right. Industrial designers design everything else.
Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of like, what is it? What do you do? It's like, how come everyone knows what an architect is, but nobody knows what an industrial designer is?
Man.
It's like, right? Everything else in the world is designed just like houses and buildings, but for some reason people think it just comes squirting out of a factory. I don't know. They don't think that there's people who go into a field to learn how, just like an architect, to design products. I think it depends on the person, but often that's like a big light bulb going off for kids. And why I'm very interested in explaining that and having kids get it early is so that if they were like me, they would have been working on things knowing there was a profession, and very excited to be aiming their mind at it from a pretty young age, I think, where it's exciting if that's what you want to do, if you want to create things, to know that it's a huge field. And for some reason, it's just not as known as architecture, so that it's harder for people to find their way. And so that's why I stress so much time on explaining it, and then explaining not just about toy invention, but that toys are just one small part of the giant field of industrial design.
That's actually really, I never thought about it like that till you just said that. I don't know. I think maybe because people just view, like, specifically they view toys as like, oh, it comes from, like you said, a factory or like a company. They don't really have a face to it. I don't know. But buildings don't really have faces to it too, unless you're into architecture, kind of. Unless you know.
Yeah. Maybe it's because people, when we live in a home, you're much more, it's about your own personal space, and and comforts and style. You know, so there's just a lot more universal. You know, throughout the ages, homes are sort of always been more the important thing. Tools, you know, industrial designers sort of have created the tools.
Mm-hmm.
And so over time, you'll see how tools have changed and how products have changed. But think of all the technology and the explosion of industrial design and, you know, computers. And then when you look at iPhones or things like that, of course, the aesthetic of the product is pretty simple, but the design work is now, much of it is in the interface design, the user interface, you know, the actual way people interact with something, the ergonomics, the touch, the feel, the way, you know, we take it for granted, all those things that have been developed were all done by basically some sort of industrial designer who then specialized more in interaction or you know, that type of design. But it's really the same thing about the interface between a person and a product, and whether that is a three-dimensional interface, like a better water pitcher that fits your hand better, that's made of the right material, that lets you pour easier, and the spout is designed like, that's all things an industrial designer would do, or whether it's the way the interface works, you know, to make your the game you're playing work smoother. All those things, you know, have people that spend their careers refining those details.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of that sounds like it's kind of psychology. Like when you're buying something, you think, okay, well, how can this product be better than the next product? How can this product help me? It's like psychology in a sense, or also like a lot of brands, like whether it be Target or just other brands, they love using the color red because the color red, it draws people's attention. Like, you know, just
Mm-hmm.
designing a logo with like a bright color is going to capture attention like that. So it's crazy how psychology kind of goes into like making logos and trying to attract people. It's kind of
Yeah.
cool. I ain't gonna lie.
Yeah, color is a huge part. You're right. It's a very, very big emotional part of design. It's pretty interesting. You know, think about all of those are fields that are in the visual arts in some form, but they're not artists. I knew I didn't want to be, I drew a lot, and
Mm-hmm.
I do love drawing still, and I'll do, you know, my own artwork, but I had no desire or thoughts about ever becoming like an artist. I knew I wanted to use my artistic ability to create things that you could touch and feel. And, you know, that's why all things like Bop It or some of my other games, Perplexus, you know, the Simon Air that I designed, they're all things that are very sculptural that you'd put on a table and leave out even when you're not playing them. That's to me my industrial design background. When you look at the difference between my games versus other people's games that are more like a board game, all those cards. I love playing cards. I love card games. I just haven't really designed very many of them because I'm much more interested in the three-dimensional type of games.
Hmm. I kind of want to go back to something you kind of touched up on. You said how you were going to school for engineering, but then you decided that you wanted to go for industrial design. When you
Right.
told your family, friends, and parents that, how did they feel about you wanting to make that switch?
Well, I was really, really lucky because the only reason I made the switch was my dad was he's the one that could see how unhappy I was
Mm.
in engineering, and he just knew, probably as you imagine, like he saw me growing up drawing and being artistic and doing ceramic, doing all these very artistic things, and I won awards for my artwork. And, you know, so I think as a parent, you're sort of always hoping your kid finds what their passion is and finds, you know, and so he saw that this wasn't for me, and he was actually a part-time actor, and he was an English teacher at a school, but he did some acting. He was on a photo shoot or you know, some sort of a film, and the director, he was just casually talking in a break to one of the directors, and the director said, he was talking about his son, and his director said, "Oh, your son should look at industrial design at the school I went to. I went to the school called Art Center for Film, but they have this thing called industrial design." And so my dad listened and said, "Oh," and found the address, sent for the catalog. And that's how I got that catalog, was because my dad actually sent away for it. And I was like, "Oh yeah, whatever." And then I opened it up and I was like, that's it. So I was very, very lucky to have both my parents were in theater. and sort of artistic
Yeah.
themselves. So they were extremely open and encouraging to me, which I know a lot of people don't have. So I've always felt extremely fortunate for that.
Oh, well, that's amazing. That's a cool story, man. Um, so on the flip side, where do you think if if your dad would have told you, stay in engineering, do you think you would have listened to him, or you think you would have just still went to industrial design?
Hmm, hard to say. If you knew my dad, he's a pretty open guy. I would never say that.
Uh-huh.
But I think, boy, what do you know? What I have found over the years, with my own experience, with my own kids, with everyone I've met, that the hardest thing in life is not getting what you want, but knowing what you want.
Mm.
If you don't know what you want, you will be miserable. And you go through life, you go through different phases of this. Sometimes you're just so sure, I know what I want. I know what I want to do. And you can be so possessed that if you'll notice, how often do you not get that thing? Like when you know what you want, even if you get there some convoluted way that you never expected, you look back and go, wow, I got what like one way or another. If you stick with something, I believe it's very, very possible you'll figure it out. Just you put it out there and it draws you to it. However, if you don't know what you want, you will go around in circles until and that's what you should do. Go around in circles till so you go, I know what I want. And then once you know what you want, you will be able to find some plan to get there. So for me, I can't imagine, if I was miserable, it's miserable not just that I didn't like engineering, but that I didn't really know what else I wanted to do. And that's what was made me feel most miserable. But I went through one flip of a catalog page, I went from feeling like I was the only kid who didn't know what he wanted to the only kid who did know what he wanted. Because when I started to tell people, wow, I found this thing in industrial design, I'm going there, I'm going to go to the school, I'm going to apply, and I hope I get in. And then the feedback I got from friends or cousins, family was, wow, you're so lucky. I wish I knew what I wanted to do. And before that point, I figured everyone else knew what they wanted to do, and I just was the only one who didn't know. So I think that's why I believe it's extremely common for people not to quite know what they want. And even if you kind of know what you want, sometimes it's about getting more specific about exactly what you want. And the more work you do on figuring it out, the happier you'll be, even if you don't get it right away, because you have something to strive for that you're really passionate about. And so to me, the luckiest thing in the world was me finding something that I was so sure I wanted to do. Think how lucky I was compared to, well, maybe I'll try it, maybe this, just think of the difference in power of that statement. So what drove me literally to this day has been being just in love with that concept of using my skills and my brain and my, just everything that felt like me, I could apply towards that profession. And it obviously paid off. With that passion was what carried me through inventing new things and really pushing even to this day, I know what I want, and I just have to figure out how to get there and the right people to work with and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you're a go getter, man. That's what they call you, a go getter. Somebody who's just gonna go go go. Like that's cool though to have that attribute.
Yeah.
I remember hearing you say that earlier in your career you've helped create like logos for some brands. What was like the biggest brand you worked with?
Oh, I didn't. I worked a little bit on logos, but more I created the images of bottles. Like
Okay.
I worked with people that were doing brand identity. When I was a freelancer, I started out working on brands like Hornitos Tequila and Woodford Reserve and Clorox and what are a couple of other, Chevron. Like all these big brands there was a corporate identity firm in San Francisco called, well, there's a bunch of different ones. Anyway, it was a big mecca for that type of agencies. And I got known as the guy who could do their 3D stuff. So if they got a job from Chevron to do a new oil container, they would be doing the logos and brand identity. And I might be in some of those meetings, but I was really there to do the 3D industrial design side. So I would design the oil container and then work with them on the logo, how it fit on the bottle, things like that.
Okay.
But the bottle was sort of part of the brand identity. That might have been how you heard it, is when I created the bottle for Clorox, the Clorox toilet cleaner bottle, which is probably the most famous I've done. It's ergonomics and aesthetics combined. It's not just how it functions under the toilet seat, but it's also the sleek look of it has to be like a brand identity. It has to represent confidence and form, and just like when you see a car, and a car has a personality to it depending on what it's supposed to do. That's what bottles are like. So Woodford Reserve, which is a famous bourbon bottle that's still out there, that I wanted to make it more like a whiskey flask. So it's a very flat sort of shape reminiscent of that, but also it just fit their image, that idea of that shape. It was functional but also aesthetic, and as an extremely understated logo, so that it gave the whole product this sense of being kind of classy, and really let the form of the bottle be the identity much more than the logo. So that's kind of what I learned from that whole part of my career, was creating objects that were as much of the brand identity as the logo.
Wow. The way you the way you explain things, man, it really sounds like a movie director. Like the way I don't know, your brain is amazing, man. Do you have a brand that you always wanted to work with, but you haven't yet?
I would love to work with Nike or one of these bigger sporting goods companies that, a lot of the games I do are very physically active. And I think it would be a great mashup to have, some of the things I've done, not just Bop It, but a lot of games I've created that are very much about physical motion. Wouldn't that be cool to have, fitness products or things that were sort of half game, half product with a really big brand like that? So that's the first one that would come to mind for me.
Man, that would be fire, bro. That would be fire.
Mm-hmm.
Or it would be cool if you could, do you know what FaZe Clan is?
I don't think so. What is that?
So FaZe Clan is like a gaming organization, one of the biggest esports teams in the world. But they're starting to come over into the more brand type side. They make clothes and stuff like that. It would be cool if you could do something with them, because you're both like in a gaming world, kind of. You on the more traditional side of games, them into video games. It would be cool to see that crossover.
Yeah. Well, there's been quite a few attempts at bringing a Bop It-like interface to the gaming world. And in fact, as you can imagine, working on VR and other titles. But so, yeah, I totally agree. It's the principle of a lot of the things I do are interesting, how they relate to the video game world and how they're merging back together, because my whole philosophy has been something I call animate the person. That, like, the person is the show, not the game. It's about the person. And so when you think about, like, even playing a game of cards, right? Do you play any card games?
Oh yeah, my favorite is I Declare War. That's my favorite.
War, sure. So that's a pretty simple game, right?
Yeah.
Simple. But why is it fun to play?
You said why do I find it fun to play?
Yeah.
It's just like fate, just like luck. Like, you don't know if you're gonna win. You just put the cards down. It's like whatever's meant to happen is gonna happen. That's why I like the game.
Right. You like it because it's fate and luck,
mm-hmm.
and it's easy to play with anyone, universal. But it's about the people, because what's happening to you and the person you're playing with while you're playing war? What do you do? Describe the scene? What's happening?
Usually I'm laughing and taking a cards low key, like I'm just laughing at them, or when I'm putting the cards down, like smiling.
Right. So that game animated the people. It made them smile. It made them laugh. It made them throw down a card. It made them scream. It made them, oh, you were lucky. Right? It animates you. That's what the game's purpose is. So when you think about a game, and like I said in the beginning, it's not to solve a problem. It's to create an experience. And it's to have you spend time with someone you want to spend time with, in a really fun way, and kind of help, but it lets your personality come out, because some people, when they lose at war, they're good sports, bad sports, whatever it is. And so the person is the show, is sort of my philosophy about games. Even Bop It's not, it's a cool looking thing, but it's nothing without, right? The person, what's the person doing? Describe the people. They're passing it. They're, people say it's part of their childhood. That's because it created this very simple interaction where they could pass it around and laugh and call each other names and whatever. That's the experience. So thinking about games, you have to think, how does it animate the person? The person is the show. Watch the player, not the game, is the sort of my mantra. So when you play, a game with someone of cards, even, it's about that. And what's kind of merged together is, think about video games. For a long time, you sat down, you moved your thumbs a few times and had a glazed look on your face. That wasn't much fun to watch, but you could do it with friends. And once you do it with friends, they start interacting and talking to each other, right? It creates a whole different dynamic when you play a game like Mario Kart together in the same room. Or then, of course, comes the advent of streaming and of being able to do that live with people. So now we're getting back to the thing I'm interested in, which is a video game creating interaction between the players. And think of that's its purpose. You're trying to solve problems. Now you're getting all this interaction. Then fast forward to Twitch and all of the esports stuff, where now it's all about the person who's playing the game and what they're saying, and you're watching the person. So it's a full circle to something I've literally said for 30 years, which is watch the person, not the game. The person is the show. And Twitch is really just, in a way, proving that out to me. So that's kind of my whole design game philosophy. And I all I can say is it always works. If you can find how to make it work with a product you're doing, I claim that it's almost always a key to success in virtually almost any game that I can think of.
Okay, that's actually a gem right there. Animate the player, not the game.
It's my mantra, and I've said it for many years, and I'm surprised how it's how you do that. Like I'd say, there's no secret to how I create successful games. Mm-hmm. That's it. Because I'm not making it a secret. I think it does take some thought into how you apply that rule.
Okay. I know you said that earlier in this interview that you really didn't want to go into, like, you liked drawing and stuff like that, but when it came to being an architect or, architecture stuff, you didn't really find that too, I guess, pleasing to you. Now that, how do I put this, now that you are really big within making games and stuff like that, have you ever thought of just making a home, becoming an architect, or no?
That's an intriguing question, and it really is interesting to think. It says a lot more about why people, how different we all are into where our attention, what we like to put our attention on, maybe, especially in design. A lot of people are artistic or they are very creative, but where are they creative? Where do they apply their creativity? What feels like home to them, or not home as in a physical space, but like, where do they feel at home? And I've just always felt at home designing things that I can touch, feel ergonomically, that I love textures. I love sculptural things. And I seem to be very focused on things that you can hold in your hand. And I like the touch and the feel of things a lot, and very tactile. So I think that although I have done architectural partly to make a living, since I was so good at drawing, I've drawn a lot of physical spaces, a lot of buildings and interiors. That's how I could afford to do speculative toy invention, is I could make money as an illustrator. But I didn't like designing those spaces. It doesn't get me excited. Even to this day, I have opinions about architecture. I love architecture. I love interior spaces. My own home with my wife, we've done some really cool stuff that we spend a lot of time on, but it doesn't ever feel like as exciting to me as a game or a product or something that has a whole different purpose. And so I just don't relate to it at all. Like I knew in high school when there was, oh, you should go into engineering or be an architect. And I just remember saying, I don't want to be, I have no interest whatsoever in being an architect. It literally couldn't have been, there wasn't even an inkling. So I've always been fascinated with that, because there are a lot of architects or people that are able to do, they really embrace all of design. And I think that's wonderful. But I think it's just up to the individual, what gets you excited. And I'm really obsessed with things that are sort of smaller, interactive, and tactile.
Okay. Okay. So hypothetically speaking, because you said you worked on some stuff with your wife in your home, hypothetically speaking, what does your dream home look like? Are you in the process of building that?
Oh, well, I like a lot of things, that's the problem. I do appreciate, like, I would love a sleek, our home is sort of craftsman, a little older home that's been redone a few times that we've spent a lot of time on. I put a lot of skylights in it because I love light, and so I do like light and spaces that are pretty clean, but I also love textures. So one of the things is, unlike really sleek modern homes that are, kind of monotone, and that I like layering lots and lots of textures. And if there's a designer, William Morris, from the, I think late 1800s or 1900, early 1900s as well, that was more about doing these homes in the craftsman style that had lots of pattern on top of pattern. The carpet's one pattern, the walls another, and you got wallpaper, you got this. And I really love the challenge of mixing all this together. But if you think about it, that's kind of like my products. They're not just simple. There's always a lot of texture and different shapes in them. So I'm very consistent, I think, with that. I like that kind of whimsical feel of patterns, not super sleek. I love when I go into someone's modern home, I'm always like, wow, this is so cool. Everything's so clean. But I think personally, I tend to lean towards eventually the space is going to have a lot of really cool stuff in it.
Okay. Yeah, man, I would love to have at least, I'd say like a 4-bedroom, maybe 3 floors,
Mm-hmm.
kitchen, attic, basement. Because I've never had an attic or a basement. I've never even had my own room, bro. I've never had my own room before, ever. So, like, I would love to have a nice home.
Yeah, I've got I'm not broadcasting from it now, but my favorite, I would be okay with nothing except what I call the shed in our house. It was a garden shed when we got the house, and I imagined myself setting up my design studio in there as my at-home studio.
Mm-hmm.
And I eventually put it on a real roof, because it didn't have a real roof. It was just like a shed roof, and eventually redid the whole thing, really, but made it into this perfect studio for me to work in, with, where I can hang up my products on the wall and do all sorts. Like if you see pictures of me on TikTok or Instagram, that's in I call it the shed, even though it's not a shed anymore.
Yeah.
That's its name, the shed. So, but it's very industrial materials, and I have, like, the walls are made of this stuff you can pin everything up on, and there's some corrugated metal sort of for accents. And also I play music, so it sort of doubles as my band room. So it's a real creative space, and I think everyone should have a shed, or, it has a bed that folds out. I could literally live in that place. The size of half the size of a garage.
So, as a child, what type of music were you growing up listening to?
Well, I grew up sort of, my music period was probably 70s, like anything starting out 70s. But as I got into the late 70s, in college, I was totally, overwhelmed by the mood. That was a real interesting part of music, if you think about it, as the Bee Gees and disco and things like that was sort of trending out. In came Talking Heads, Devo, things like The Clash, Pretenders, B-52s, that era of you know, post disco, post punk, you know, that whole era, Elvis Costello. Those are kind of, I think, a really interesting part of music history, because it wasn't hard rock like Led Zeppelin or those kind of things from classic rock, or the Stones. It was more artsy. So I think I kind of got into the more art music side of things. And, you know, now I play in some, you know, we call dad bands. A lot of it is tribute rock, of course. We've written some stuff that's sort of in that vein, I would say, just more of that kind of classic rock, but with a little more art quality to it. But I like any genre of really good music. You know, it's hard to find a genre that I don't like. It's really just about the specific artist and song.
Okay. I'm definitely going to leave the link to your band link down below in this interview so people can check it out.
Oh, oh no, I wouldn't do that.
Why? Why? Why'd you say that? Why?
Oh, there's so many horrible videos. Like, someone took a video of us playing when it wasn't even, you know, intended to be recorded. And you're just like, please don't put this on YouTube. And I don't know, you'll find stuff was never meant to be viewed. I did write I have a 6-song EP that I never published that's actually,
oh wow,
pretty good. I did it I really wanted to write some songs and play it, and I thought it was excellent. I just never felt like I didn't have the desire to put it out there publicly, but maybe someday.
Okay, so hypothetically, you said you didn't want to publish it, would you want to put it out independently, or would you want to put it out with a label, or how would that work?
I think it was just more for me to, you know, it's topics, personal stuff that I thought was fun. Thing about, you know, so I did it when it was done. It was like, well, I did it to create the songs, and everyone who listened, you know, friends or even my kids or their friends, I was surprised how many people really like music. Like, you should do something with this. I don't know why. I just felt like I didn't feel like that was the purpose, but part of it was I wanted to put visuals to it if I was going to have music. A lot of them are kind of story like, and I thought, you know, maybe if I found someone who wanted to do some interesting story videos to them, I might put them out as more like the background music to that story. But it wasn't my aspiration to become a, you know, rock star or anything. I just thought it was fun to do, and I'm happy to be a simple dad band.
So do you guys have an EP out?
No.
No.
I mean, right now I'm in a band that we're just cover songs to play at a bar when they have an open slot some night, and it's just fun. And if we can get people dancing, that's success, right? That's the main success.
So is any of that on YouTube of you guys performing? Well, videos that I was going to say, not. Videos that you want people to see, is that it on the internet? Or?
God, I hope not. I don't know. I wish I could control only like the 4 times that you know, the one thing that I don't know if you know who the Pretenders were, but they're a pretty fun you know, band in really 80s. Late probably they had a song, you know, right last 79, 80, 81, and they were really good, and they had a female singer named Chrissy Hind, who's fantastic. And we found this one version of our band, this woman who looked and sang just like her. So we went and did a full tribute band to the Pretenders. And when that was up, that really looked, I think there's a video of that up there somewhere, but she's amazing. So it's more about her, not me. So no, I would say I'm not going to ask people to go look and watch me play music.
Okay. So I want to ask a question that I'm really curious about. So video games started to go mainstream like maybe around 1978, and around 2005, I think roughly it says 38 to 42% of households had some sort of gaming console in their home. So I said that to ask, if you were born in like 99 and you took the industrial design route, do you think you would have went over to video games instead of more traditional games? Or
that is a very intriguing question. I think Um, it's hard to say. I, I, I've, well, I have done and am working on all sorts of things that are more like specific types of controllers that are much more physical than a normal controller controlling the action on the screen. I'm just intrigued with that whole area, but not specifically, ideas for just a game that I have no burning desire to do a game that I've created that's like, oh, I want to make this into a video game. Besides things that are related to this more like different types of interface or the variations on a Bop It like controller. I've put a lot of time into Bop It like controllers, and how to make them integrate to a video experience way before the Wii or Guitar Hero. Those are great examples, right, of a peripheral or a controller that then connected people with the toy to the video screen. And I really love that potential of that area. I'm surprised there's not more in that area, but besides that kind of thing, I haven't spent a lot of time trying to create, I've done mobile games for Bop It and all that kind of stuff, but really I've been so busy with all of that, I haven't really looked at other titles.
Okay. Do you have, you said you like video games. Do you have like a top three favorite video games?
Or right now, I have not played one in a long time. I do things like, I play things like Jackbox games. They're not video games. Like when I do a screen-based game, they're more social interaction.
Mm-hmm. They could be old games too. It doesn't matter. Arcade games.
Yeah, they're old games. Originally arcade games was my era. So of course I played all of the arcade games from Joust, Pac-Man, that era way back. Mm-hmm. Those kind of things. I think I was fortunate to grow up with that, where the joystick was such a big clunky thing that, compared to all the little buttons that you have to control now with a game controller. So I'm kind of, if you think how tactile that is, that big giant knob was all you needed for most of those games. I think that's sort of the level that I'm at.
Yeah.
There is a Bop It video game out, the arcade game out right now that finally got done. It was a concept I had for a long time. And it's a, stand-up arcade game where you have the Bop It controls instead of joysticks. It's by Sega. It looks pretty cool, but it's a redemption game for like Dave & Buster's, that kind of thing.
What the heck? That's actually pretty cool.
Yeah. I do have a lot, like I'm working on games right now that are like, I have a game I'm working on that's more like a cornhole type game, or they're not electronic. I don't have, let's see. Oh, there is a really cool electronic game, not video game, that's coming out. It's kind of like if Beat Saber was a Bop It.
Oh wow.
It's not a Bop It. It's with another company, but it's like this stick that you wave up, down, left, right, forward while the beat comes down the thing, and it's going to be coming out later this year. And we call it Beat Blast as a working title. I don't know what the company's going to finally name it, but watch for it. It's like a baton that you play like Beat Saber, but you don't need glasses or anything. It's just like Bop It meets Beat Saber, if you think of it that way. So I love Beat Saber in terms of playing a game like that. But sometimes it'll inspire me to do something like, how can I take this out of the VR world and into just a mass market game?
Mm-hmm. That's I just keep thinking about the whole arcade. You say you're big into arcade games. That's why, even I was born in '99. I grew up on like arcade games like Pac-Man. Oh, bro, there was this one game, Galactica. It was like you were in a spaceship. Oh man, I love that.
Galactica
game.
Or Galaga?
Oh, Galaga. There you go, Galaga.
Oh yeah, actually, that is. I just said that of all of the games that I got good at and would go to my go-to at an arcade, it's Galaga.
Oh, that game was amazing, yo.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Why do you think that game works so well? Like as a gamer, what do you think is the secret to that game?
You're putting me on the spot, man. As a gamer, what do I think works about that
Yeah.
game?
Like why is that better than another game? You know, like each of these games has a different thing. What do you think is so compelling about it?
Honestly, for me personally, I just say like just aim and shoot, just blast and shoot,
Mhm.
like literally, like you're just in space, just shooting. Like
Yeah.
it's pretty
It's
simple, kind of.
but it's the scroll, the back and forth with the joystick. I guess
Oh,
what I'm getting at with it is the pattern. Very some video games, at least the old school ones, are done with such interesting algorithms and patterns where there's a predictable nature to round one and round two and round three, and then there's a bonus round. There's kind of a rhythm to them. You know
mm-hmm.
what I mean about how you get through the levels, and then when you come back to a higher level, you can realize, oh, it's like level two only with this new twist. I really like the thought that goes into some of those old school games where they kind of take you through the learning curve, and then you see the swarm of spaceships, and you don't think there's any way you could ever get through it at first, but then you start recognizing the patterns, and then they use that knowledge in a later round that they know that the pattern. I
Oh
just find
yeah,
it, those are the kind of game design breakdown that I guess when I play a video game, I really appreciate the thought that goes into that. And that's very similar to when I do a game, that's a handheld game. It's got those same elements where you're trying to get someone into it and then get them kind of more into it, using the things they learn in early rounds and later rounds. Hey, speaking of which, have you seen me talk about the Bop It button, the thing I did last year?
yeah. I have a question. Yeah.
Oh, because I have it right here. Oops, it just went off.
What's one step above pathetic?
All right, so that's the Bop It button. I don't know if you're going to ask about it, but it's on the same subject. It's just one button. It's a one button interface. No on off, no volume, no anything. So part of this was me for the 25th anniversary saying, what can I do that's special for Bop It? That a Bop It fan, let's say they had every single Bop It that I ever created, which is like over 25 different Bop Its. What haven't they experienced? So I wanted to try and do something, and I came up with this. Well, let's do the most elegant, simple thing possible: a one-button Bop It. And this one-button Bop It, at first I thought it was just going to be almost like a joke, like it'll just say Bop It, and it'll keep track of how long you bop it, and it can go to 1,000,000. And then I was literally going to just do that and have it have funny expressions in it, so you could kind of play it, let go of the button like this, and listen, right?
Bobby, what? That was a hot mess.
So you do it again.
Bobby. Oh, that was adorable.
Right? And then, so you just press it and hear something funny. But if you keep pressing it, how high could you go? Then I decided, what if I put in don't bop it? What happens? So let's see if we can get that.
Bobby. 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 No. Don't bop it. 4, 3.
Right? So now when it says don't bop it and you bop it, it gives you its funny response. Then I'm not going to play it because it's hard to, keep going and going. Sometimes you'll hear it say, do bop it, do not bop it. Then it'll say, do tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. It'll sit there like a clock ticking, bop it. But you have to remember, did it say do or don't at the beginning of this thing? So I basically took it from a game design point of view. I decided that this Bop It was going to be not about dexterity like all the other Bop Its as much, where you twist and pull and kind of keep all that straight. It's about dexterity of your brain. Can you keep focus to get a high score by separating the bop it, do bop it, do not bop it, don't bop it, do not bop it, bop it.
Yeah.
That like you start getting really, you realize you have to just listen and do what it says. Same principle, but it's much more of a focal experience and you can do it with your eyes closed. You can do it with, it's only one button. You can sort of do it with one hand. So it's got so many things different than what a bop it was, and yet it's the same DNA. And it was just, for me, exploring what it would be like to design a one-button bop it. Was I kept finding out more and more. Then I added a meta game to it where every time you get to 100, 100, 200, 300, it unlocks another voice. It'll give you an expression. It'll give you your score. You can unlock lives. You can, I kept adding those layers, as I was saying, like a video game where you kind of get the feel of it in the first round. And then the longer you play, the more variables it starts throwing at you. And eventually you unlock over 20 different voices. You unlock all these phrases from the past. I got my dad in there in a cameo.
Oh, wow.
I got my own voices in there. So it proved that you could do a bop it with multiple voices and have it. That's what you get as your reward as you unlock. As you get further, you unlock audio, and that's what bop it has always had, was interesting audio. It doesn't have a video screen. It doesn't have, all that stuff. So instead, I made the audio richer, so that your goal is, the longer you play, you keep realizing, I never heard that sound before. Oh, I'm going to keep playing. So here's what happens then with one button. If you push it once, it gives you your high score. Let's see what it does.
High score, 4.
Oh, a 4. I just started playing this one. It gives you a high score. It gives you an all-time score, which is how many bops you've bopped in its lifetime. And then it'll if you keep holding it, it's going to play what I call audio badges. Just like, in a video game, you get badges for certain things.
Yeah.
This is audio. It basically plays all the sounds you've unlocked so far. So this isn't going to have very many, but listen to what the audio badges sound like when I keep holding it down.
High score, 4. All-time score, 9. Bop it, 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 bop it.
So that's all I've unlocked so far. If I played this for another, few minutes, it would that list would be much longer, and so forth. So you can always, with the bop it button, go back and show off, look how much I unlocked by just holding the button down. And as an interface goes, it's kind of interesting, right? To do it with, there's nothing visual. I can't go to a screen and scroll over and click. You just have to do it all by feel and audio. So that was part of my, the fun for me was creating something that was a full-on one-button interface that you can actually access quite a bit. There's an Easter egg in here. You want to see how to unlock the whoopee cushion mode?
Sure.
Who wouldn't, right? So this is something I snuck in there. So basically I'm going to push down. You can actually change volume too. Here's how you change volume.
Wow, black.
Hear that?
Wow,
It lets you, if you interrupt it right away, you can toggle through.
wow,
Now you hold it down.
bop it.
Bruh.
So now I've unlocked whoopee cushion mode. I can just annoy people. It's just, right? That's all it does is make those sounds. Now, if I don't touch it, so I was like, that's cool. Then I couldn't stop. I was like, wait a minute. What happened? Now when you leave it for 10 seconds, it starts doing randomly. So it gives you 10 seconds to go put it under someone's chair and then walk away like they don't see you doing it. And then it starts making these sounds.
Bruh.
So that's I just kept going. So the more you get in this product, there's a bunch of stuff like that where you keep finding these Easter eggs. Yep, there it goes. So now to get out of it, you got to hold it down. Let's see.
150.
So this mode, listen to this. This jumps you to an advanced mode. Here is a lot of the voices. Here's what it sounds like when you have multiple voices. Listen to this.
Bop it, bop it. Do not bop it. Don't bop it, 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 bop it. Don't bop it. Don't bop it. Do. Bop it. Bop it, bop it, bop it. Don't.
It says don't, but now it's ticking. Making you wait, annoying you.
Wow.
Right? It's just sitting there. You just have to Of course I bopped it.
Dude, don't bop it. Score 167. High score 167. Sure, dude.
So all of that is,
Wow.
you see how the game builds and the audio builds. So right now, if I held it down, you'd start to hear all of those voices that I started to unlock. So I don't know how many people will appreciate it, but I had a gas building this. And you can see how much thought you can put into just a one button game,
Yeah, no, the question I had about that was because I remember seeing that about 2 years ago before it actually came out. How long was the single Bop It button in like development?
A couple years. I thought of it a couple years ago when I started my TikTok page, just sort of threw it out there. And yeah, it just took a while to get, it takes a long time to get a product to come out.
Yeah. Wow, man, that's man, you're tripping me out, man. The way that your brain thinks about like developing things, it's like really cool. But,
Well, it's intense and I don't know, it's just, I don't like everything I do to be, I've done a lot of things besides Bop It, and I've got some really cool games out there, but it's so special because I keep finding more things you can do. Like after all this time that I could figure out a one button game could actually turn into this whole other area is really interesting to me. So I feel like as long as I'm here and I've got the chance to work on something that millions of people know the name, I don't mind spending time on it, and trying to explore new ways to do things with it. It's a very expandable sort of gameplay, and there's more to come.
okay, we'll be looking forward to that. Could you explain to the listeners what right is?
Very simply, right. We talked a little bit about it, is about when you ask about success, is your idea really can't succeed until everything is right. RITE, relationship, idea, timing, and execution. So when you ask that question about success, you can't really say this is a formula necessarily that will guarantee success. But I can say that if you don't consider those things, you probably won't succeed. So if those were the four legs of a table, the R, the I, the T, and the E, you have to imagine that any idea you're trying to develop needs to sit on a four-legged table that is, also a very tall table. That you can't have those four things and be just a little bit of everything. You have to have a lot of everything. So the relationships, you really have to have the right relationships for the product you're trying to pitch or the idea you're trying to pitch. And if you don't, you can just decide, I don't really know enough people to get enough feedback, or I don't know the right vendors, I don't know the right collaborators, I don't know who to pitch it to. It's just a checkpoint. Like, who do I need to know to try to get this product to market? I need to know this toy company. I need to know the right people at that toy company. It goes on and on. It's not just a simple question. And then when the I for idea, it's not just your idea. Most people think, oh, my idea is, I got this great idea, you should do it. It's like, well, that's just one part of any success. You need the relationships, the idea, the timing, and the execution. So, but you still also need to make sure that your idea isn't just the first thing you thought of. The first thought of is probably not the best version of your idea. So most people stop short rather than saying, how can I make that idea leg of the table really tall as well? So make sure you are hard on yourself and make the idea as strong and tall as you can. The timing is, is it the right time? Did you research to find out, was this product out before? Is there a trend that this lines up with? Is there some way to make the timing better? Is it, is there a time of year it should come out? Like, there's a lot of things about timing that you can control. It's not just luck. And the last one is execution, which is like we were just talking about. If I said, let's do a one button Bop It, you might have 5 different versions of it if 5 different people did it. So it's up to you just because you have an idea doesn't mean that that describes at all its best execution, its best, the best way to do that idea. And so many ideas fail because people didn't spend enough time on the execution, making that leg of the table as tall as possible and exploring many different ways before settling on it. So, when people say I have this great idea, they usually forget, right, that there's the right idea at the right time to the right people with the right execution. Mm-hmm. That's usually, if you trace back to any big idea, it has some version of those four things, whether it's a toy or a solution for a product for, doing your laundry or a movie idea, or, but when people just want to get rewarded, like, I got this great idea, where do I sell my idea? You're like, well, pretty difficult to just sell an idea. Mm-hmm. You've kind of got to, it doesn't mean you have to make it or manufacture it, but it does mean you have to pay attention to all the things that usually have to be in place before that idea can sell.
Okay. Was Go-Go Worms one of the first toys you licensed to Hasbro?
It was the first game I licensed to Hasbro, yes.
And was Hasbro, at that time, were they Milton at the time? Was the company Milton under Hasbro?
Well, Hasbro, there always was a Hasbro, but it was divided up into Parker Brothers, Milton Bradley, Kenner, later Tiger. Mm-hmm. Like they absorbed a lot of companies through the years.
Yeah.
As did Mattel and a lot of these companies. So, it was technically, the box said Milton Bradley, but I believe they were already part of Hasbro.
Okay. How did you come up with the idea for Go-Go Worms?
Go-Go Worms actually was because I was talking to people who are with Milton Bradley. They often, with their favorite inventors, they'll say, do you have any idea? We're looking for an idea that uses Play-Doh. So that idea is one in which you take Play-Doh and you extrude it into these worms that roll on top of wheels, and it makes the worms it's like a worm race. And that was it. It just started as that idea. But the invention was the fact that when you extrude it, these wheels go underneath the extrusions of the dough. So it allows them to go, a foot instead of a few inches. And that makes a game out of it. There's a whole other side of it there. But it was stimulated by actual request. Do you have any game ideas that use Play-Doh? So think about that when I talk about, that's not the idea. I have an idea, a game that uses Play-Doh, right? The idea is not that. It's the idea is what is the game and how is it executed and all of those things.
Okay. Were you happy with the success of Go-Go Worms?
Yeah, I was very happy. It only lasted a couple years, really, but it made money and I made some money, and it encouraged me. If there was no Go-Go Worms, there may never have been a Bop It, because I needed that encouragement that, that was about 3 or 4 years before, but it helped me establish that relationship with the right company.
Wow. So was 1992, that was the first time you worked with Hasbro?
I had started pitching ideas to companies starting in 1990. So don't know. I think that Go-Go Worms was the first product I licensed to them, but I'd been trying for a couple of years.
Okay. So what made you want to reach out to Hasbro?
Well, they were the biggest game company, and growing up, I played lots of games that had the Milton Bradley Parker Brothers logo on them. So I don't think I cared that much about the name Hasbro. And through the years, that name it means more today than it did 30 years ago. I think it to me, the game brands Parker Brothers and Milton Bradley meant a lot more to me than the name Hasbro. So that's why I reached out to them, as I wanted a game that would be published by my childhood, favorite.
Okay. Were you able to work with Milton Bradley before they became Hasbro, or no?
Yeah, I don't know. I actually don't know what year they technically were acquired, but it was probably
91, 92, something like that.
They might have been acquired even earlier. I don't remember, but it's complicated when companies acquire another company. Mm-hmm. So they'll often keep the name and the division going because of the brand, the brand, whatever, equity.
Mm-hmm.
How are we doing on time? I think I have another call coming up. Is there any last burning question you have?
Yeah, yeah, my interviews usually last like a really, really long time. And we're on question 18, and my interview has like 50 questions, dude.
Oh, we may have to do a part two.
Okay.
Because I'll usually allow about an hour or so.
Okay.
Pick a last one for today. What would it be?
Okay, where am I at? When did you create Kid LLC? Is the next question.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's two versions. Kid, Klitsner Industrial Design. Just happens to spell kid, right? Which is why I created it. From being an industrial designer, wanting to do toys and games, KID was a fun name to have, because it represented both the toys and industrial design. And I'd been working before then as an industrial designer, but I wanted a new name, and I did it in 1990. Was Klitsner Industrial Design LLC. On my birthday, I changed the name. So I know exactly when I became Kid LLC. Then 10 years later, in 2000, I actually started the group with my partners, Gary and Brian. Klitsner, it's basically now Kid Group, KID Group LLC. So there's Kid Group, and that is our partnership where we create. Gary is a coder, programmer. He does a lot of the business side, and so a lot of the electronic games we do and the prototyping, he handles the electronic prototyping, and Brian sort of heads up the execution of a lot of the games. And besides us all creating games together, he works with the model makers, and he makes sure that we get the prototypes done. I'm much more on the concept and the pitch side, and I'll prototype things with my hands. But so we all pitch in a little, but that's really the growth of what I've done, is starting out on my own and then eventually having Gary and Brian join me. So there's, Klitsner Industrial Design LLC is technically the company where I created Bop It and some of the previous games from, but starting in 2000, everything we've created since then is part of the partnership of Kid Group.
Okay. Again, I'm sorry about the time. Because I like to have my interviews sound like a conversation, where it's like sometimes I ask questions, sometimes we just have a conversation. But I'm sorry about that.
No, it's no problem. I'm happy to get on again. I just didn't. I'm here. I need to get off because I'm also sort of taking care of my dad this week. So I need to check in. But just why don't we? If you want to go through other questions, let's schedule a part two.
Okay, sure. Because later on, I ask about Cyber Fingers, Hyper Dash. I want to ask about other things other than Bop It. Because I really did research on you. So
absolutely, let's do it. Yeah, why don't you, let me throw out some times, and I'll make sure to allow another hour, and we'll answer those. Sound like good questions. You did a lot of research.
Yeah, thank you. Again, I appreciate you coming on and giving me a chance to speak to you, man. You have an amazing brain. It's cool to pick your brain, man. It's dope.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate you asking, and I hope it's useful. This will close out, and it'll give me a link. You have obviously the recording, but would it be helpful because this does like a written transcript that's pretty good, and you're welcome to use that. You can search words and search things so that you can, if you're looking for parts, it makes it easy to search. Or I can just send you the link. You can do what you want with it, but.
Okay.
If it's helpful, I'll make sure to forward that to you.
Okay, I'd appreciate that. So when do you think we could do a part two? Maybe in a couple of days, about a week, or?
Let me see. The rest of this week is really, really busy. That's why I wanted to fit us in today. So I'd say it's probably a week from now. But let me look on the calendar. Bug me if you don't hear from me in the next day or so. But it's, I actually don't do these very often because it's just super tight. Yeah, and I honestly usually don't go over an hour with a podcast. So I'm happy to do it. Let's make sure that we, I'll find time and we will do it because I really appreciate you putting the time into all this prep, and I want to get it down. I'm I'm anxious to do it, but patience. If I don't have a spot, it's not that I don't want to do it. It's just I'm trying to balance a ton of things right now.
Of course, I understand. I understand.
um, cool. Well, let's follow up at that. I'll leave it at this and let you digest some of that, and then we'll go on to part two probably next week.
Okay. Okay.
All
That sounds
right.
good. That sounds good.
Awesome.
Today, this is actually a continuation of episode 16 that hasn't been released yet. I'm back with the man, the myth, the legend, Dan Klitsner, the creator of Bop It, the Bop It inventor. How you doing today, Dan?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I'm hanging in there. Doing pretty good. I remember before we started recording, I was telling you a little bit how the whole Bop It Rift community and how I'm like kind of in touch with some of those guys. And I was talking to them. And they told me that really nobody has ever like contacted them or like. So you know how I'm doing an interview with you, and I contacted them to like help me and stuff like that. They said nobody's ever contacted them. Like,
Yeah, who would contact them? A news station or someone like that?
I mean, like people who interview you, like nobody's ever like
Oh
tried
yeah.
to contact them.
Yeah. Well, they're a great resource for Boppet information. So good that you found them.
Yeah, they're pretty obscure too. Nobody really knows about them,
Hmm.
but they're really cool people. I know when we first or when we last left off this interview, we're about to talk about Bop It. I was about to get into some of my Bop It questions, and I
Hmm.
remember I seen somewhere that said that you didn't know.
Well, no, it was a lead item um, with Parker Brothers,
Mhm.
and so you know that if which is owned by Hasbro, and it's basically the biggest game company in the world. So I was, I knew it was going to be a significant launch. I think what people don't know, they launch a lot of new games every year, and most of them don't become hits. They sell well, and by selling well, they're probably um, they won't do an item unless it sells 250,000 units in its first year. They would have just dropped it by then. So I was definitely knew it was going to be it's a achievement just to have a licensed game
Mhm.
with Hasbro, Parker Brothers, Milton Bradley, that group. So that was pretty exciting. I had already had a couple products licensed by them, and I knew what to expect. But what I didn't expect, of course, was that it would last for 25 years and become sort of part of pop culture.
Mhm.
That doesn't happen probably hardly ever. There's maybe a few in the history of games that's happened to. So I don't think anyone could have predicted that.
What do you think was the reasoning for that?
Why do you think it succeeded versus
Like,
why
why do
other
you think
games
it was
failed?
able to like stand out in pop culture for this long?
I think there's a few reasons. One is that it has what I think people would call white space, meaning there really wasn't something in that space yet. There's been three-dimensional games like Rubik's Cube or Simon, and there had been games with voice in them. There had been games that are, obviously there's lots of other types of games, board games, things like that, but there hadn't really been a game that was three-dimensional. The big differentiation was the idea that it made people move in three dimensions, twist, pull, bop, and that it had it created activity in the person much more than games previously of that genre. And also it looked intriguing, it looked like something fun and quirky. So it was very visual. And really the part that has made it last, I think, and become part of pop culture is the sound and the voice. It's much more engaging when you think of something like Simon, although Simon's done amazingly well, obviously, or a Rubik's Cube. they don't have a personality. You know, Bop It had a personality to start with, and we kept developing that personality the longer it went. So that, and the music that was part of Bop It was also extremely iconic. So for all of the kids that played it in the 90s, that just sort of became sort of like a song you would have listened to in the 90s, and a hit song that then you hear years later and it's got all that nostalgia. So I think those three things, the music, the fact that it was voice and that it was three-dimensional, really made it different than anything that had been out. And it was just a really good, simple game. So those are sort of my analysis.
Yeah, that was amazing analysis. Like I think that Bop It, how do I put this? Bop It, not even just Bop It, like even other toys. What's the other toy? Connect Four. Like I think that's also under Hasbro. Like
Yeah.
some of these inventions really do stand like the test of time. Like Bop It just had the 27th birthday. Like does that ever like does it ever surprise you now? Like dang, like Bop It is still here, still thriving. Does that surprise you? Still?
Not anymore. Not
Not anymore.
anymore. It's not surprising just because now we've hit the mark where um, I don't see how it would go away at this
Hmm.
point because the people that played it are now having kids and who
Yeah.
loved it, so they're buying it for their kids. And we've been careful to try to expand it into other things like the licensed characters. It's just so predominant in references in pop culture, social media. You'll see it all the time. TikTok dances, you'll see celebrities playing with it who had it as kids. Um, there's a new video game console by Sega, for arcades
Mhm.
that I've pushed for a long time. So that's just coming out. There's VR games coming out. It's really just getting bigger. So the fact that it's lasted, it it, most significantly, as I said, white space, Twister, Connect Four, Rubik's Cube. These are all things that they've existed a long time because they sort of found a spot that was very simple and kind of pure. Connect Four, there are a lot of games like it, sort of, tic-tac-toe games, whatever. It just had such a simplicity to it that that's why it succeeded. But if you tried to come out with another game that was similar, let's say someone did a game that was like tic-tac-toe, or people have tried, to
Hmm.
do something that's similar. There's no room for it anymore because they did such a good job. Once that game exists, there isn't a you can't have more in that space than one that's going to last usually. Twister, people don't have like a bunch of versions of Twister type game. It's sort of the only one that sort of works in that space. So when games last, it's because they found this white space, and they have to be a good game
Yeah.
and simple. And then they tend to last because that space sort of existed before the toy came there. The toy found that space. So if you want to think of it that way, is like if Bop It hadn't existed, people still, like to be social. They would have, when you play hot potato or you play, um, games where you're standing around a circle and you're playing catch, throwing something to each other, passing it around. Um, a game like you can think about those type of activities are already there, but this game, created kind of made that into a much more scripted, easy to play behavior. But you have to think of it that way, that when a thing lasts, it's because I think the behavior sort of already existed. People like listening to music. They like, this idea of it just telling you what to do and you do it.
Mhm.
It's like people say Simon Says or Mother May I. Like there's a lot of classic games that sort of had that people played. This just put it into a marketable form.
Do you know how many units Bop It has sold so far in the span of 27 years?
Um, I estimate when you count all the different variations and all the different um, licensed versions and mini versions and all those together, I think it's close to 50 million.
Wow. So now I have a question for you. Do you know when Bop It hit like the first like 50,000 units sold? Do you know what you were doing where you were?
Well, I wouldn't have known the numbers. I do know when I got the phone call from Hasbro telling me, probably it was in 1997. A lot of people say 1996 is Bop It, but they're wrong. Bop It was not. It was I created it closer to 95. It
Mm-hmm.
was developed during 96. It was the trademark was issued before the game came out. So when people look it up, they'll see the trademark date
Mm-hmm.
for the is 1996. But the game did not. Nobody bought one until 1997. It wasn't launched until 97. So in the summer of 97 in July was probably the first it was ever sold in a store. And as it started to take off, probably by probably in August, closer to September, I got a call from Hasbro that said this is going better than we expected. It's flying off the shelves. And so they didn't say how many had sold. They said, you know, a certain amount of units per store are selling. They have certain numbers that they track to
Mm-hmm.
tell whether something's going to go big or not. And they said it's going to be big. And so I got very excited. And then by the time Christmas hit, it was obvious that it was doing really well. And it was actually, I think it technically sold out, I believe, right around they really didn't produce more than they could sell, which was part of the success, was that it was not, when you sell out of a product, it just means people really reorder more for the next year. So, but it can't sell out too much. It's like Furby games like or products like that. You don't want to piss people off because it's not available, but
Mm-hmm.
you want to make sure people know that there's some scarcity there. So I think we got lucky that they just forecast it just right, and so that those were the indications when I knew that it was going to be big, and that's when they started talking to me about what do we do next. It was we need to follow this up, and that's when I came up with Bop It Extreme. Um, was pretty much September of '97 when I was talking to Hasbro. I said I think I know what we should do next, and so but that's didn't come out until '99, Bop It Extreme. So it took about takes about a year and a half from the time you sort of start an idea till it hits the shelf.
Okay. So when you first got that initial call from Hasbro and they said, "Hey, like this is doing better than what we expected, and this is going to be a hit." Do you know who was like the first person you told after that phone call with Hasbro? Like a friend, family member?
Um, I remember being very excited. It was probably my wife.
Mm. What was her reaction?
Uh, well, I think we were all like excited, hoping that it meant we were going to make, some money on
Yeah.
it. but
Understandable.
but more than that, my exact feeling, honestly, and I did tell my parents, of course, I was pretty excited. My mom was very excited. Um, I I grew up playing Milton Bradley and Parker Brothers games. I loved games and I remember the logo very clearly when we'd get a game. Most of them were Milton Bradley or Parker Brothers. And it meant a lot to me when I would pull a game out and I would see that logo. It kind of reminded me of these really fun times with friends and family, playing Mousetrap or games like, Risk, those kind of things, and or Perfection. So these games that I grew up with that were kind of mechanical and plasticky games, I I remember thinking when I was told that Bop It was going to be a hit, that I had created something that was going to have that some other kid was going to open that up and see that logo and have great memories with their friends or family, and think about it in a good way, that and that I was now it was kind of crazy. Like now I created something that's going to go in one of those boxes that I used to open as a kid with all this excitement. And so I just remember, when I really heard them say this is going to be they knew pretty early, or at some point in that year, they could tell by the numbers it was going to be a big hit.
Mhm.
And so I just got super excited. It was like a dream come true.
You know, what you just said kind of segues perfectly into my next question because I remember I think I told you when we last spoke, I was saying how like I actually was never able to afford a Bop It. And I used to just walk around, I think it was Target at the time, walk around Target, literally just
Yeah.
playing with the Bop It as I'm walking around. And
Hmm.
I say that to ask, what's like the coolest thing about creating toys? Because I feel like creating toys is like the equivalent to creating a piece of someone's childhood. So what would you say is the best thing about creating toys?
That is the best thing.
Yeah.
you know, to connect. It's a connection with people, um, in a really fun, joyful way. To know that I'm doing this because I love design, and as an industrial designer, I like making things. I like playing games with people, and I really believe that that connection you make with friends and family when you're playing a game is super valuable and special and memorable. And like you said, those you'll remember those things years later, laughing with friends, right? Hanging
Yeah.
out, not being just those are really valuable moments. And to get so much now, of course, with social media, to hear about so many people who had these golden moments of fun, or being angry, or being this, or laughing, or playing with friends, it's just overwhelming. It's like, wow, I'm so honored that I was somehow part of their experience, even though, you know, if it wasn't for a Bop It, they would have probably been playing cards, or maybe they
Yeah.
would have been playing catch. It's not like they wouldn't have had those moments. I believe people find those moments one way or the other. You know, it's just cool that Bop It was part of that memory.
I think something else that's like pretty cool about Bop It that it's actually like good for kids' brains because I feel like a lot of games now, whether they're video games or board games, it's like they have no substance. I seen an article, I think it was from Maximi ND or something like that, and
Huh.
it listed Bop It and Bop It Extreme as like good brain boosting games for kids with ADHD and learning disabilities. And the article read,
Hmm.
these games are great for boosting brain speed, auditory processing, motor planning, reaction time, and the fact is they are fun. For the older or more coordinated kids, get the XT. It's pricey and is much more challenging, and it has earphones so parents don't go nuts from the noise. Now, I read the
Yeah.
article to say, did you think Bop It would be able to help kids to that extent when it first hit the market, or?
Uh, I just thought it was fun. Um, I liked that it was this cool game that you could play, and which it's hard to say. You know what? I didn't I didn't know. I didn't really think of it that way,
Mhm.
honestly. I think inherently, um, most of the games that I create, sort of intuitively, they're more of like what a designer would make, not, I don't do Barbie dolls, and I don't create things that are sort of a little more like a toy. I'm sort of creating experiences
Yeah.
like Perplexus and Bop It and the new Pop It Pro that I came out with. They're things that are, um, they're inherently developmental, I guess, because they're using physical actions and making you move and listen and be physical. And that idea of a three-dimensional, very purposely, things that are making you use your mind three-dimensionally are, I think, I didn't think of it as like, oh, this will be educational. More like, this is a good challenge. This is fun to do. And it's a refreshing break from all the games that existed even at the time. We didn't have games on our phone back then, really, or maybe they were just starting, but there were all those handheld games that had screens in them that you just took your thumbs and pushed on buttons, just like what we do with a phone today. So in that way, I think I was very much trying to create something that was an alternative to using your thumbs on a game. It was how to use your brain three-dimensionally, and that's what most of my games have been since then. So I guess that's sort of an answer that says it's just the way I think, and I'm glad that they are uh, developmental in some way. But that article, by the way, must be very old because the Bop at XT hasn't existed for a while, and the headphone jack, which I fought for, uh, only lasted a couple of years, and then they had to take it out for price reasons. And
Oh
everyone
wow.
says, why don't you put a headphone jack in your Bop It? And I said, why don't you pay $30 for a Bop It? If everyone would pay $30 instead of saying it needs to be 20 or
Yeah.
less, we could do a lot of things. And people say, why don't you have a Bluetooth? Why don't you do this? Why do you do that? And I'd say the answer is exactly the same every time, because you wouldn't pay for it.
Yeah.
Most people say they would. Oh no, I would pay for that. It's like, statistics show that you want to pay $20, and you've wanted to pay $20 for 25 years, and the price unfortunately hasn't changed, and yet the costs, labor, materials, shipping, have
Mhm.
like tripled. So how in the world are you supposed to create the same fun experiences when consumers are not willing to let toys increase in price with inflation anywhere near what everything else has? So
Yeah.
the quality, when people say, "Oh, I love that Bop It, that the headphone jack, and it was so big, and why did they make it so cheap?" It's like, because people don't seem to want to pay any more than $20 for a game. So that's really the biggest issue and the biggest disappointment with something like Bop It is, if you play one today, it just feels cheap because they think the price point is more important than the quality. Um, so I don't agree, trying to work on ways around that, but that's the answer to why we don't have a headphone jack anymore.
That's really interesting because in terms of like the video game world has been able to do that to where now like video games are like $100. I remember being a kid and they were like 50, $60 for a new game, sometimes even 40 depending on the game.
Yeah.
Do you think the toy industry will ever get to that point?
I hope so. I mean, I think people just have to value the experience,
Yeah.
or companies just have to take a stand and say, this is what we charge and this is the quality that we want to produce.
Mhm.
Um, but we'll see.
Yeah. I kind of want to get into Bop It for Good. So for everybody listening, Bop It for Good is a website that sells like Bop It theme merchandise, and if not some, I think all of the proceeds go to like charitable causes. A couple have been amused for autism and a lighthouse for the blind and visually impaired. So where did the Bop It for Good concept come from, Dan?
That came from looking back and being astonished that it had been, well, as it approached 25 years for Bop It, which just can't really believe 25 years have gone by. I've been busy the whole time creating lots of other games
Hmm.
and obviously doing lots of versions of Bop It and all these kind of things. So it's hard to believe, but it's so significant that I just felt very grateful. My wife and I felt super grateful to have been part of it, to have come up with the idea, created it, or been part of. But then what about all the other people it took to make it successful? And I wanted to thank kind of three groups. Um, the people that helped create it with me, meaning even if they were the marketer, the manufacturer, besides the idea itself, there was a lot of people that it took to make that work. The voices, the music. I wanted to thank um, the people, especially that the fans, that have bought it all these years. So doing something really special for them, trying to create a product that they would really delight in. And I wanted to do something good for some special groups that Bop It has been really important to. And one was autism and the other was people that are blind, which Bop It has had some magical properties, completely unintentionally, but that's over 25 years, what as it's turned out, that people, especially for blind people, can play Bop It equally well with or without vision. One of the few games like that that's so not even it's really not a disadvantage to play it without being able to see once someone knows how to play it. So that's where Bop It for Good came from, which is that concept of, in general, how to use Bop It to do the most good. Because as it becomes more popular and people um, want my time, want to, oh, you invented Bop It, and can you sign this? Can you do this? Whatever. I said, well, the way I'm trying to make my decisions are based on how can I use this to do the most good. And so the first thing we did was create this Bop It button, which came out last year. And I did it independently with Hasbro's permission, separate from Hasbro, as a special Bop It, where if you buy one, we donated one to the Lighthouse for the Blind so that they could and so that's why you bought it through our website, Bop It for Good, versus in the store initially. And what's cool is then they could use it for their youth programs, so that as a donation or to kids, that it's very simple. The Bop It button, you just bop it or you don't bop it.
Yeah.
And yet it's really clever. And then they can sell it in their stores, or in which they have an adaptability store for people, so that they make all the money. They make 100%. It's not just like some of the proceeds. You buy one, we get your $25, and we can afford for that to sell you one and give one to Lighthouse, and we break even. So we don't make money, but we don't lose money.
Mm-hmm.
But then when Lighthouse sells it to their public for $25, they make the full $25. They didn't have to pay for the product at all. So it's a really efficient business model to raise money for charity, and also to bring awareness about games that are all inclusive, like Bop It, for a community like that. So that was just really special for doing that with them. And we've done, as you said, with autism, is the same. People with autism it seem very it really helps a lot of families with kids with autism, where they can play Bop It together for some reason. For someone who really has those issues, Bop It's very special. So that was, I just felt not just grateful for the success of Bop It, but grateful that unintentionally I'd created something that did so much good for people that I wanted to just do more good.
Yeah. Bop It has it's it's like you said, it filled so many different areas. Like you were saying, there wasn't really a game like Bop It before. Like that space wasn't filled, and then it became this big thing in pop culture. And then it helps people with autism. Like it's easier for kids to play. Like people that are blind. Like you've Bop It has done just a lot, and it's kind of mind blowing that it's done that much, especially over 27 years.
Yeah, it's the biggest mind-blowing thing to me to indicate, well, this idea of, wow, this is, how can we do even more good with this,
Mm-hmm.
is when you look, I don't know if we covered this on the first part of the interview, but if you search Bop It on Spotify, you're going to find well over 50 songs that have been created by hip hop artists, EDM, rock. Like, it shows how deep it was into their childhoods, that now these are musicians that had it when they were 9, 10, 11, 12. Now they're in their 30s, and they're creating music, either riffing off of it or using the soundtrack, or spoofing it a little bit, but they're not really funny songs, they're just cool songs.
Yeah.
And if you search it, I keep telling people, you think oh yeah, but until you search it and you actually go deep into listening to more than 10 of the songs, or 20 of the songs, or 30 of the songs, you start to go like, whoa, this, like, to me, that's probably left the biggest impression. Like, I've seen, tons of spoofs in social media, or people send me things all the time. Like, it'll be referenced in a comedian's joke or in something, but nothing's affected me like listening to just these are songs that are actually titled Bop It. They're not even like it's just referred to in the song. There's probably far more like that. These are just songs where you see the album art, you see the song. It's just kind of unreal and it's completely unprecedented. There's nothing even close that's had this many artists create, you know, music about your game or toy. And
Yeah.
that's a true sign of pop culture. You know, when you get into, and there's artists that use it and things like that now, but those are super, you know, like really I get chills about that one. Like, well, I never would have dreamed that something you create actually turns into that wide of a an audience. And I think to the point where many people who do things with it on social media or listen to these songs and do it whatever video, they might not even know what the game Bop It is, but they just like the music.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's a pretty when you say what's the longevity of it, it just becomes part of the culture in that way. So we'll see what happens next. But I'm working on a bunch of stuff with music that I think will help that side of it out.
Okay. Okay. Keep an eye out for that. I know Bop It had like a Simpsons parody called Bonk It. If you could choose to have like Bop It be in any cartoon as a parody, what would you choose?
The Simpsons, of course.
Oh, you would choose The Simpsons again?
If we could do it again, yeah. I mean, I think The Simpsons is fantastic. So that was honestly one of the highlights of it was having it on The Simpsons. I think uh,
I think Tom and Jerry would have been pretty cool,
Tom and
or
Jerry.
Scooby Doo or something. That'd have been fire.
Yeah, Scooby. I would say like you know it depends on the reference
Mm.
and how they do it. Um, I think I would love to see it, maybe not in a cartoon, but like to me, the next Toy Story,
Ooh,
right?
oh, that would be
I,
fire.
I I'd rather have there be some sort of, you know, weird bop it that just keeps telling people what to do and they get upset at it. And like you could totally make that into a character, even though it doesn't have arms and legs. And I heard that someone wanted to do it and they didn't do it because they didn't at the time they started the first Toy Story. It wasn't old enough, you know, as a
Mm,
classic game because they had things like Slinky and Mr.
yeah,
Potato Head and Barbies. But to me, if there ever was another one, I know a lot of people at Pixar and those people that ILM and all the different groups that sort of create a lot of that stuff. And there are a ton of Op It fans. And so, you know, to me, that would be the home run is seeing it appear in something like that. And maybe, so I guess that's animated, obviously, but
yeah.
not a TV series.
Hmm.
Um, and just seeing it in, you know, someone's music video, which it's been in quite a few.
Hmm.
Things like that are pretty exciting.
Okay, so what artist would you like to see use Bop It in a music video?
Hmm. I would, gosh, it'd be depends on the genre, I guess. Um, you know, I think I just love to see it in someone's video that was a big fan. Like I
Okay.
know Machine Gun Kelly has played with it a lot on social media and has a pretty famous video from a couple of years ago at Christmas that went super viral that I did a little riff
Yeah.
on. And then I know that like Wiz Khalifa has used it. You know, I've seen celebrity
Hmm.
musicians using it. Um, but you know, someone like Snoop Dogg, someone who just like, you know, really doing something fun with it like that. But probably someone in their 30s that, you know, kind of grew up with it when they were younger and then they have
Okay.
it as an artist.
I know a lot of people compare Bop It to Simon. Both are like really similar, but like I remember you said, I forgot where I heard you say this. I don't know if it was in our first part of the interview, or you said in another interview how like Simon is more linear and Bop It is more like three dimensional, which changes the experience drastically. I say that to ask, did you ever get to talk to the guy who made Simon, Ralph H. Baer?
No, I've never met him.
No.
Is he still around?
No, I think he passed away in like 2013, 2014.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. But also it's interesting because Simon, I know that he worked for BMT, I believe, or was it Marvin Glass? They worked for one of the inventing studios, and it was actually, it was a game that was in arcades. It was a video game, is where Simon, if you look it up, came from. And they just sort of took this game that was sort of, they figured out how to take a thing that, you know, required a large cabinet to play in like a video arcade,
Hmm.
and figured out how to make it into a handheld or an electronic. That's the biggest innovation, is in the 70s, to have come up with a way to just sort of package it. Um, so that was pretty cool that they did that. So I'm not sure if his background was more engineering or electronic based, but I have a feeling it was. Versus my background is industrial design. So when you think of the difference, Bop It is more of a sculptural thing,
Hmm.
more forms and tactile, which is what my industrial design background and music background, versus Simon is very much like an engineer might create it. You know, they're very different parts of the brain.
Hmm.
Well, actually, he said, watch the kid, not the toy.
Ah, okay.
And so my I guess where I've taken it further, or what I interpret it is if watch the kid means the toy's purpose is to animate the kid, is
Mm,
to make them something that's watchable. It's the same thing, except it's different in that I don't like the watching part. That's more as you're creating something or evaluating something, you can tell like when people are playing a card game, or people are playing you know, they're playing Twister, they're playing something. You can understand what that means, is that, is it entertaining to watch a person playing a game? And how that came about, I had heard that, and it sort of struck me as something that watch the kid. But then the idea is, when you're a designer, you're thinking, like when I was working on the remote control ideas that I turned into more of these, physical things. It was helpful because I thought, well, it's not any fun to watch someone use a remote control on their TV. They're literally about almost as immobile as possible. They're staring at a TV and
mhm,
they're pushing buttons with their thumb. What could be more less interactive? And so remember, Bop It came from this idea of a remote called the channel bopper, where I did the opposite. Like, how
mhm,
can I make it funny? How can it be, how can I animate a kid when they're changing channels on a TV? And that's what led to the idea of bopping it on the table to change channels. So just really important when I'm sort of trying to explain this to people, is what it inspired was, take any object that doesn't require much interaction to use, and just say, what can I do to make the person have to do the most, uh, animate them the most. So it isn't so much about watching. I mean, watching someone is after it's been designed, you can watch them. But when you're designing something, you have to think proactively. I am going to animate kids with my game or toy. How am I going to do that? So hopefully that makes sense.
okay. Dan, I know you said you only had 40 minutes. We've been recording for 41, and still have quite a bit of questions left. Did you?
If you give me your top three, and I'll squeeze them in.
Damn, you said top three, huh?
Yeah, so just pick one. Pick one, or pick whatever. Do the one. Is there one that uh you really have a burning desire to know the answer?
I'm sorry, because I'm scrolling through the last questions I have.
So
Is there 15?
you can also send them to me, and ahead of if you want, and if I have time. Part of it's just my schedule's really crazy to find time, but I can also late at night or something, I'd be happy to just record answers to them if you like.
Okay. And you wouldn't have enough time to do a part three to this, huh?
I might, but I don't want to keep holding you up. So we can do either way. If you're not in a rush, we'll find time again, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm
But
down.
why don't you try? I have about 10 more minutes. Why don't you ask me a couple now?
Okay. Because I definitely, you know, I can understand that you're a busy person, and I feel like this interview is a huge. I look at it as a big. It's just a big project for me. It's a big piece of art. Like I'm super into Bop It, and I don't know. I want this interview to come out exactly how I have it in my
Absolutely.
head, and
Well,
however
that's
long
then
that takes, it doesn't matter to me.
okay. Well, I appreciate that. Why don't we keep working on it? But yeah, sorry, I know it's been hard to connect, so
Hmm.
let's try it. Let's keep going.
Okay. So I'm gonna ask you probably two more questions, and then we can wrap it up, Dan.
Okay.
Let's see. Where am I at? Um, I know that the 27th birthday of Bop it just passed. How does it feel for Bop It to be 27 years old, Dan?
Are you sure we didn't talk about this?
I,
Didn't we
I don't.
or we talked about it I think we started off with this today.
Did we?
Yeah.
Oh shit! I'm gonna edit that
I
out then,
think
Dan. Sorry about
I think so.
that. There's a lot of
Well,
questions on
or
here.
maybe it was a specific, maybe it was slightly different, but I can answer it again,
No,
different way.
it's
Yeah,
it's okay, Dan. I'm sorry about
yeah,
that.
yeah, no problem.
Let's see. Let's see.
But I remember I was saying it's actually 26 years old because the people think,
Oh,
well,
okay.
the concept launched in 97, but it's listed as being conceived.
96.
Well, I think it was conceived more closer to 95, but it was developed during 96 and came out in 97. So how it feels is I said I have a 20, so I have a 27-year-old son who was probably conceived about the same time Boppet was. So all I could say is I'm really it's like having a child, creating something last, but there's no comparison to you know my actual children
Yeah.
are far bigger accomplishments
Yeah.
than conceiving of a Boppet. I'm very proud of Boppet. How does it feel? It feels amazing, and I'm glad it's helped so many people. And it's so much fun to have. But I would, you know, I just think it's interesting that my conceiving of an idea is something that, well, here's a proverb that you can find in fortune cookies sometimes. It
Okay.
says, ideas are like children. There are none so wonderful as your own.
Wow. That's actually
Right?
pretty deep. Wow. Yeah.
So what it's saying is that most people who have an idea, I have this idea, it's so good. And what they say is, not only are people in love with their own ideas, like they're in love with their children, it's about, it also kind of implies this idea of conceiving of something and that it's yours and that you're creating it and you're nurturing it and you're growing it and you're hoping that an idea lasts several years or but then the analogy sort of drifts off because raising a child or is they have their own independent, that's not, you're not supposed to be controlling them, like your idea, you have this wonderful idea, but then I see the analogy split apart. But the thing you have to keep in mind, maybe the part that is similar, is when someone's talking about their idea and they say, my idea, this is what, it's as if they're talking about their kid
Mm.
every time, and you're like, okay, enough about your kid. Just because you love your kid doesn't mean everyone in the world will. But when people have an idea, they think everyone's going to love my idea. Everyone's going to love it. It's the best idea ever. And of course, they say everyone, and that's very bad marketing because, as you probably know, you can't market to everyone. You got to
Yeah.
pick who is your audience. But it's the same thing as saying everyone everyone's going to love my child. They're the best child in the world, right? It just makes you laugh because you realize how blinded we are by, it's wonderful to be proud of your child, proud of your idea, but keep in mind that you're biased. And so when you're pitching ideas to people, I always think it's a good practice to say, remember, it's kind of like you're in a room trying to convince everyone that your kid is the best one. That it gets a little boring if you don't really get real about it. So I don't know what that has to do with Bop at being 27 years old, except it just reminded me of that. And I'd say it is like having a child that's, it hasn't just been stagnant, it's been nurtured and it's grown, and but it is like having a child that's affected 50 million or 100 million people. That's pretty crazy to think how many people have interacted with it. So in some ways, I think that's maybe how it feels, is just sort of overwhelming, and you know uh, it's very dreamlike to look back and think, did that really happen?
Yeah.
And that's why, as we talked about, that's why Bop It for Good and things like that are so important to me. Is like, well, I want to do something special with this, because even though I've created 300 other games and toys, and some have done very, very well, this shows how rare it is to have something like this.
Yeah. Like one of your toys that I thought was like, I thought it was pretty cool, but you said it was a rejected idea. It was where is it? What's it called? Cyber Fingers. I thought
Oh,
that
you on the thing.
that was
Yeah.
pretty cool, but you said it was a rejected idea. Like
Yeah.
what was the story behind Cyber Fingers?
Oh, that was just kind of a fun idea of having these things you'd put on your fingers that kind of gave your fingers different properties, um, that would be as if you were a cyborg and you had these, robotic fingers.
Hmm.
So some of them would have sound, some might fire something, some might have a weird light in it, others would have, you know, transform into something. It was just kind of this idea of, rather than a toy being separate, that you would kind of wear it on one of your hands, and be kind of fun. But I don't know. Some ideas just don't have are the wrong time, wrong place, wrong
Hmm.
company. So you never know.
I understand that. Um, I was doing research a while ago, and I have this written down in my notes. I never heard about this thing until I started doing research for the interview. Um, could you explain what is a a boptopus and how is that project coming along?
Boctopus was the first idea I had to do to celebrate the 25th anniversary. It's an eight-armed boppet that I've shown sort of glimpses of,
Hmm.
and I'm still working on it. It's a pretty ambitious project. It would be probably $120 boppet,
Ooh.
like a crazy thing, but a beautiful eight-armed boppet sculpture that, it was sort of like the thing for millennials that I thought, they had boppet as a kid. This was like the mother of all boppets, and a really almost like a centerpiece to a table, but you can play it with eight. It's like to your point about video games. Hey, if people can spend, like, you go, whoo, that seems expensive.
Yeah.
But come on, a video game's $100, and it's just this electronic thing that is inside of the screen, versus a beautiful physical sculpture that you can put on your table. um you can imagine this thing with with eight arms, and each thing is different, and the idea is you can get eight people around it to play a battle royale,
Mhm.
where it's basically eliminates down to one person the way it plays, and it's all done with this. There's some really cool gameplays, and it's got lights and visuals in it that just make it this super high end, super high musical Bluetooth experience. Everything that I told you we can't do when people want a game for $20,
Mhm.
it's making something so over the top that it can sell for what it's worth. And for the people that had Bop It as a kid, that now hopefully had, jobs and could afford $100 thing, I felt it was something worth looking at. So I'm looking at, if I did, I'd probably do it as a Kickstarter when it comes out, and
Okay.
we'll see. If the answer will be, if people decide to fund it, then I guess it's a worthwhile idea.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't pay no 150 for a video game but for a Boptopus, 150 I would. Like you said, it's almost like a collector's item. It's something physical that I can hold it in my hands physically. Like a video game, if you have the disc, but everything's going digital now. So, but
Yeah,
I think it will be worth it though, 100%.
I think, to me, it's the idea that a great, as an industrial designer, primarily, first, for games and toys, I don't like the idea that you create a thing that gets played with and then put away for a long time
Hmm.
or forever. I like to me, the later Boppets that we've done, and certainly Perplexus and Simon Air. If you look at all those products, they're designed to be left on a table and sort of enhance your environment when you're not playing it, because then you get more value out of it. Like, what do people pay for something to decorate their room if it's a cool object or a cool lamp? I was trying to say, think of this as a thing that lights up, that's really, really fun even when you're not playing it. And now it doesn't seem like that much money for something that's also one of the coolest games you can play at a party with a bunch of friends. You know, anyway, that's my long-term goal, is I want to create that.
It's crazy that you say that because I seen an article. It was by Yoohoo titled "The 25th Anniversary Edition Bop It will be a perfect drinking game for elder millennials." So I say that to ask: did you ever think adults would attempt to use Bop It as like a late night adult drinking game?
Actually, yes.
Yeah.
From the very beginning, it was already being used like that. Like,
Okay.
that was almost, why it was so popular, is that it had a pretty wide age range. But
Hmm.
the button, what they're talking about in that article, was probably,
Bop It
yeah,
button.
the button, because that was the first Bop It to be designed to just put on your desk
Hmm.
and leave it out. So again, same theme, right? It's just one button, but because of that, it's got a flat bottom on it. It so you understand, where do I do this? I leave it on my desk because I'm a proud Bop It fan, and whenever I walk by, I can just smack it and it says something funny. But of course, that one, you keep playing it and it keeps getting more and more crazy. So I think that yeah, that article picked up on the fact that it was really, nostalgic as well as being a new game.
I also seen that you have a Bop It, like a huge. It's like a huge Bop It, and I was wondering, is that a one of one?
Oh, the one in my backdrop of my in my studio. That is a Bop It made of fiberglass. That was just a prop for the very first exhibit, uh, trade show when Bop It appeared. They, often toy companies, when they do exhibits, will have a giant version of their product hanging over you know the booth or something, so that it'll kind of be, you can see it from a distance. So that's what that
Mhm.
was for. And luckily, um, I was able to get it when that trade show was over.
And that's a one of one, right?
Yeah. Although
And
I'm looking at getting inflatable ones made so that you could have one like that.
that's actually cool.
Yeah, like a pool float.
Going back to like the 25th anniversary Bop It button, how they saying like it's a good um drinking game for millennials. Have you ever thought about making those late night party games for adults? Have you done that already or?
Oh, yeah, I've done a lot of games like that. There's, I mean, there's plenty of games that are. I mean, well, you put it this way, that Bop It is sort of unusual. That's really very simple, like, kind of like a hot potato type of game, versus the games that I think are more fun, for like simple games like dice games, and
Mhm.
card things that are really easy and simple. The problem with Bop It is, it's when you have too big of a party, and people are making a lot of noise, you can't hear it.
Mhm.
So I actually have a few other games out. There's a new one called Beat Blast that's just coming out with Goliath Games, and it's a little bit of a, it's sort of the closest thing to a Bop It game using lights instead of voice commands. It plays a little bit like like Beat Saber, if you know VR games. But it's got this sort of light shaft that where lights come down down the shaft like a little saber towards you, and when you, depending on the color of the light, kind of like the way Guitar Hero played, where when the, you're supposed to strum the right note when the, with a note came down to a certain spot on the screen. That's sort of how this game plays. When it comes down to where your the hilt of the saber is, you have to, if it's blue, you have to swipe down. If it's red, you have to swipe left, right, and if it's yellow, you have to thrust forward. And it gets multiple things that combos, and when you watch someone play it, it definitely, it's different than Bop It. It doesn't have the personality or the voice, but it does have that thing where it animates and creates physical, you can play it at a party without worrying about hearing it. So that's not really designed as a party game, but it could be played a little bit like that. But I've done a ton of other games, dice games, things like that, where I'm not sure if any of them are out, but I'm always working on stuff like that. I love party games.
And I know you were talking a little bit about how MGK made a video about a Bop It. And I think you actually made him a Bop It. Did he ever receive it?
MGK, they never asked. I sent notes to the account and said, let me know if you want it, I'll send it. But their social media manager obviously didn't find it.
Yeah.
Or if they did, I missed it. Honestly, at some point I stopped tracking this stuff. So I've actually found a lot of things like a year later where some big influencer asked something, and actually there's someone, I've got to get something out now. Some extremely well-known celebrity wanted me to sign a Bop It and send it, and I have to get that out the door. And I almost missed it. It was just like buried in my Instagram.
Yeah.
So it definitely happens.
Yo, what's going on, everybody? Slight intermission. We're back at it with the Dan Klitsner interview from Bop It. We're gonna get right back into this. Dan, I kind of want to know, what was the story behind Perplexus?
Perplexus is a long and perplexing story, to put it. If people that know it, it's a maze, a three-dimensional maze that is really, the story behind it is sort of like that. Started over 20 years ago, I believe maybe 23 years ago at this point, around 2000, when although I rarely collaborate with people outside of our group, my partners and I, there was someone who said, hey, can you talk to this teacher of mine at this junior college? He has this kind of idea for a puzzle, and he wanted to talk to someone. I said, I really don't do that very often, but I will. And this really nice, charming guy came in named Michael McGinnis to show me something in my office, and it was this little kind of a square cube with a balsa wood maze inside that was similar to things I'd seen before that looked kind of like that. But it had one little feature, which was this: you could turn it over and do the maze on both sides. And I thought that was pretty interesting. And I said, I'm not going to, it's not like you to show me an idea and I do something with it. I said, I have my own ideas, but if you'd like to work together, here's what I would do. And I sort of sketched out and worked with them on how I would turn it into sort of a toy, and how, some other features, and just sort of emphasizing what I thought would work in the toy industry, because it was really more of like an obscure kind of thing at the time. What he showed was not viable for mass market games or toys. And he did it. And most people don't do that. They say they're going to, but they go away and they never come back. And So, and it was also because he was such a nice guy, and I could tell so reasonable and fun to be with, and not like a lot of people with ideas are kind of strange and paranoid and very difficult to work with. So I could tell he was really a neat person. And so we hit it off, and he came back with something that was kind of closer to this idea that I had, and kind of did a few refinements, came back again, and he turned out to be this incredibly talented artist and designer. So it was a really good match to sort of work with him. And through a series of different iterations and pitching it to different companies, which is what I do. So I took it and worked on this final model and got it into a little company called Next Toys, or it wasn't the same company that eventually did it. And it was this little thing. You can still find the commercial maybe on YouTube. It was for the original Perplexus. And that it sort of fizzled. It was with, I think it might have been something that I don't even know if they were sold. I think it was just a sizzle and it didn't go anywhere. It's really a small sort of version of it. And so then later I still liked the idea, and I was working with Tiger Electronics. And the guy who had started with this other one with Nextoy had actually, now he was working for Tiger Electronics, and he said, whatever happened to that thing? And we sort of started to look at it again. And instead I said, well, let's make it bigger. Let's make it this big. What happens if we make it much bigger? And so that's how it got to become this big sphere. And also it wasn't a sphere originally, it was a square. And I said, I have a rule: when all else fails, make it round. And I don't know, I've done a lot of things that you make them sort of spherical, and for some reason it works. So I made it in a sphere. Michael did an amazing job. He's really deserves a credit for all the little ingenious nooks and crannies in that thing. We worked with it, and my partner Brian Clemens was also very instrumental in that. And eventually got it licensed to Tiger Electronics. Well, what happened with Tiger is they were about to launch it, or they did launch it. They were about to launch it, and they were acquired by Hasbro. So once they were acquired by Hasbro, it sort of became a product that nobody really owned internally or wasn't sure what to do with, didn't get any TV advertising, didn't get any support. They just Hasbro sort of shipped 4 units per store of the original. It was called Superplexus because it was bigger than the original Perplexus, and so it was actually Superplexus. Ended up failing. It just didn't sell that well, and partly because there was no promotion. And then it was off the market, and we kept trying to get someone else to do it. And I think about 8 years later, or maybe less than that, we started to see knockoffs appear everywhere.
Wow.
And these knockoffs were someone in China, different companies had taken this and sort of turned it into a lighter weight version, but had copied exactly our pathways and everything. It was a direct knockoff. But there were some other things as well that were sort of similar. And what happened was these guys, this is the perplexing part, who were in China, they were actually Mormons on a mission to adopt Chinese children at a Chinese orphanage, found this product, and they couldn't stop playing with it, and their kids couldn't stop playing with it. And they made a deal with the Chinese company to import it to the US. And when they came to the US and they showed it to Spin Master, and to ask if they wanted to distribute it. And Spin Master said, hey, that's Dan's idea. That's not, you can't, that's, and these guys said, they had no idea, because it had been 8 years. They'd never seen it. And they called me, that Spin Master gave them my name, and we talked, and I decided, well, we've tried to pitch this elsewhere. It's being knocked off anyway. Let's figure out a deal where we could do something together. So made a deal with them to kind of help them and sort of try to get it pitched to a bigger company. And they had done a lot of work on it. And then about 3 weeks later, another group called me that said they had found it in China and were trying to import it. And I was like, well, I'm sorry, I'm confused. Aren't you with this other group? They said, nope. I said, well, it looks like from your area codes that you're both in Utah. Close, are you close to each other? Maybe you should work on it together? They said, nope, we don't want to do that. And then eventually I convinced them to work together, and they formed a company. And then that's how we finally got Perplexus out there, was this group. Like I said, it's like the maze itself, very convoluted pathway. And eventually, really short. So then with Michael and our group, and we created then Perplexus Epic, the very, very, intricate one, is sort of the idea of making a Perplexus that really stood for art and sculpture and games, and something that we thought would be really expensive and wouldn't sell that many units, but it would sort of establish this high quality image. And it turned out that the product outsold the cheaper ones because it was so beautiful and artistic. If you can get an original Perplexus Epic, the colors, the shapes, everything is really a wonderful, incredible product. And beautiful, looks great on your table. So that started to take off, and we did all sorts of other iterations of it. There's many different types of Perplexus out there now. And that was because then Spin Master got involved and was licensing it from us. So they were putting a bigger budget behind it, which was a full circle, right? Because Spin Master was the company that originally said they didn't want to do it, but that these other guys needed to talk to me to get rights to it. So at the end of the day, we ended up eventually selling Perplexus to Spin Master after working on it for 10 years with them. And that's why they have it today. So that's the long story of Perplexus. As a product, what I love about it is it's a great example of, I call it playable sculpture. That was sort of the mantra that as we were developing what it should be, we wanted people to look at it sitting on a table and think, wow, that's beautiful, and then be intrigued to play it and have the whole experience be something that was very much my industrial design roots, really a beautiful object as well as a great game.
One thing that you said that kind of stood out to me, just a quick follow-up question, was you said when it comes to working with other inventors, it's kind of somewhat difficult because some inventors may be weird when it comes to working with their inventions. So I want to know, Dan, out of all the time you've been doing this, do you prefer just working by yourself or with your team versus working with people you haven't worked with before?
Pretty much. The few times that I've tried that, this was very rare just because Michael is such an unusual person and so talented. Usually, first of all, as a professional inventor, I've got hundreds literally of ideas in the hopper that I'll never get to, that I would love to have the time to do, but I just don't. And I've never, that's the same with most inventors. You go, it's all about time. How much time can you spend on something? And so, I've got prototypes, I've got all sorts of stuff that I just have to find, when do I put time on this one versus that one? And the time to pitch it to companies is immense, the time to refine it, right? It's all about time. And so usually someone has an idea and they go, oh, I got this great idea. I want you to, I'm going to let you in on it if you'll work with me and I'll split it with you. I said, the last thing I need is to work on someone else's idea instead of one of the ones I've been dying to find time of my own to work on, and even if it's a great idea, it's still risk and time. It doesn't really matter, right? It's there's a lot of great ideas. It's how much juice you put into them. So when someone, expects that, I just sort of politely say, see, geez, it's an amazing idea. I don't want to take 50% of your idea, and I don't want to actually work on a project where I'm now 50% less return, even if it's successful, just because I could be spending the time on my own ideas, of which I'm 100% owner of, and I have 100% control. Plus, that's just the financial side. Then you have the risk that the person isn't really clear on the concept of how this industry works, and I've tried it with a couple people, and no matter what they say at the beginning of the project, they need a lot of education. They don't really know. They're afraid they're getting ripped off. They don't understand IP. They don't understand the toy companies. They don't. And so I'm sitting there educating them instead of doing what I don't mind a little of that, but I love inventing and I love doing my own projects. And like I said, it's just sort of an explanation of why I don't. Now, a lot of people, a lot of inventors, that is their business model. They're more of a representative, and that's all they do is work with inventors on their ideas. And they do the work of getting those ideas placed, at companies. But they're just very different models. And personally, I just love creating. So I don't want to get stuck, being sort of like the thing that separates an inventor from their success. Because eventually that's sort of what people think is if you're going to be a rep and try to represent other people's ideas or work with them on their ideas, you sort of become the bottleneck of their, if it doesn't work, now it's your fault,
Yeah.
So I just have found over the years, just being honest, it's just not, it's wonderful that Perplexus was worth it because Michael and I have become great friends and he's a 1 in a million, in terms of a really, and the product was, I just loved the product so much. So, but yeah, the reason I'm going over and over this is when people hear podcasts with me talking about, oh, you worked with someone, no matter what I say, they still don't hear all of this. And they call me and they want to work with me on ideas. And I say, listen to the podcast.
Yeah. So then I kind of also want to know, what was the story behind Hyperdash?
Hyperdash was a game, if you think about it, so those who don't know, it's simply an electronic device that yells red, and you've got these 5 targets, red, yellow, blue, green, orange, and it means you have to run and tag the red target before time runs out. Or in this case of Hyperdash, it's a little different. It gives you a series of targets to tag, and you have to tag them, and at the end of finishing the sequence, it gives you a time, 28 seconds or 29.4 seconds. And so you can compete with this, and it was invented. I invented it before Bop It. It was when I was starting to work on ideas that used a little bit of electronics with physical play. And I had the concept of this talking toy that just more like, almost like they were supposed to be cones, like at a sporting event, like at football, like those yellow cones. The idea that they would be around the field and you could chart your own course and run around and it would tell you which ones to tag. And I loved the idea that you could make the course whatever you want. You could put them close together or far apart. You could put them on, hide them in a house and make it a little more hide and seek. You could put them upstairs and downstairs and you could attach them to the dog or whatever you want to do. Just this creativity that you made it. And it was turned down by everyone. And even after Bop It was successful, you'd think, hey, I just created one of the world's most successful electronic games. People still didn't get it. They didn't think it was, there's something about it at the time. Everyone thought it was not truly like they thought of electronic games as sort of a solo thing you held in your hand and played. So it was about at least 10 years later, if not longer after inventing it, that I knew this guy from Wild Planet, Danny Grossman, the founder of Wild Planet when it existed. And he lived nearby, or worked nearby, and we'd have lunch once a year. And when we were having lunch, he was like, why don't we ever do products? I said, oh, I do mostly games and you do sciencey stuff. And he's like, well, if we wanted to do a game, what would it? I said, well, there is this one game that I think is pretty good because it's good for kids. It makes them physically active. And he goes, oh, I'm kind of interested in that because he had done some things like that before. And so when I showed it to him, he said, that's cool. And he went to test it and it tested really well. And so we ended up developing it with them, and they were literally around the corner from my office. Like usually I fly to Hasbro across the country. I go all over the place. And here was this company right there, the one company right near me. And so I was able to develop it with them. And lo and behold, it was a huge hit because, parents wanted their kids to be physically active. This is, and it was also right when Amazon started to sell products. And it became one of the top selling Amazon games. It was in the early days of, mommy bloggers and things like that, where and it's already in not really social media as we think of it, but it was, Facebook and Amazon reviews and things like that, because they were referring to it digitally and could have a link to Amazon where you could buy it quickly. That was very different than what was happening with the toy industry, where none of the big toy companies had any online sales at all, right? There was no, so the ability to talk about a game and sell it right off of a link to Amazon really worked, and it set all sorts of records for sales because people like getting their kids up and active. So I'm really proud of that one. It was, I think I'm more proud of that than Bop It, just because it was so because it was innovative before Bop It and nobody knew it for 10 years. I felt it proved that I was right, and that, that is the way kids want to play, or parents want kids to play. And I really, just shows you got to be really hold to your guns sometimes when something's right. But the toy companies, they're just made up of people who have their opinions based on often only what they know, which isn't usually something new. They only can base it off of what's existing. So when you have something so completely new, it's really easy for them to miss it and just literally not get it. So you really have to talk to people who really understand gameplay and why a product is good. And then they have to be able to, sell that internally to their companies. And it's hard when something really is sometimes too out of the box.
I want to get into one of your other inventions. It was called, I think it was called the Santa Claw. You said that, or I think it was in an interview, you said that there wasn't a patent on it or something like that, and the contract you signed with the toy company, I think it was called Steven, it wasn't that good. Now that you look back on it, what's like some advice you'd give, or what's some advice you would have told younger Dan when he started inventing and, signing contracts?
Yeah, it was the first product I'd licensed. And so I didn't know a lot about it. I knew enough to know that I wanted to get protection, but it was usual, or it is usual in this type of inventing that I do, where I'm not like an inventor who is expected to go out and get all the patents and get it all done and get it made. And, that's a different, like in the toy industry, you're sort of encouraged that a lot of the companies, they'll license an idea and they'll often apply for the patents because they're the ones that are producing and manufacturing it. And I thought that they were going to do that, but they didn't do it, and I didn't do it. And so it didn't have any patent, protection, because again, I expected that they would have. I had heard that toy companies usually did that, but I really didn't follow up on it very well. And it, just sort of believing in good faith, which they did. They pay, toy companies don't need you to have a patent to license an idea and pay you royalties. They just need to like the idea, and they need to know it doesn't infringe on other people's ideas. So that's all that's required. And then whether it's patented or not is really up to the toy company usually. But what I would tell younger Dan is, well, you can't patent everything as an independent inventor, because you'd literally spend more money than you make most of the time. So you're sort of stuck because you're only making a small percentage of the sales versus a toy company makes a lot more of the sales. So it's usually on them to protect that investment of their development. So I would just say, just make sure if you are licensing something that you get clear that the company you're licensing it to, part of the deal is they will protect it. And then if that company drops the product, eventually that reverts to you. So the fact is, it's been way longer than 18 years since I licensed it, so the patent would have expired by now anyway. And my real feeling is, I feel wonderful to know that the first invention that I ever licensed to a company is still out there today, 30 years later, being knocked off everywhere, so it's shareware. And I actually feel really good about it, because it's sort of, I feel good every time I see one. I don't need to make money on it to feel good that I created something that people love to use. It's really validating that it shows me that I came up with something that it showed me that it was possible to come up with ideas and that if it was a good idea, people would want it and they'd want to buy it, and they'd even want to knock it off, right? That shows you, wow, I must have come up with something great. And so it gave me confidence to do other things. And I simply chalk it up to experience. And like I said, kind of feel glad that there's a lot more of them out there than there would be if I had tried to protect it so tightly that probably could never have produced that many, and far fewer, millions of fewer people would have played it. So I believe that product's been touched and seen and played by millions of people, which is it's a great feeling.
That's actually a really good way to look at it.
Here's what you don't have to pay me, but here's what you could do to honor the IP that was created. So maybe I'll do that someday.
Okay. One of your ideas that it really mind-boggled me that this is rejected. I thought it was cool. I actually thought it was really cool. It's called Cyber Fingers. What's the story behind that? I thought that was cool, bro. I ain't gonna lie. That's cool.
It's funny. Well, I don't know. Maybe there's been things sort of like it. It was just simply this idea that you could, have these collectible, funny things that you'd stick on your finger like a robot. You become a cyber robot, but each of them would have different functions, and one was like, it'd make it look like you had, fire coming out of your finger, and the other one would be like a noisemaker, and one might be a little radio, or one might be like just silly things that you turn your fingers into these, cyborg kind of things. Who knows? It was fun. You pitch some things, and sometimes it's because it was a sketch. Maybe I never built. I don't think I built any working or even a fake prototype of it. Sometimes to sell an idea, you really need a good working prototype, and I think that product just maybe would have been better to pitch it that way, because everyone who sees that sketch thinks it's cool, but the proof is really in the prototype.
Okay. I think I've seen somewhere you've pitched over 4,000 ideas, I think, and 90% of them have been rejected. So I say that to ask, besides passion, what else is keeping you inventing?
Well, besides passion, you want to make money if you can.
Mm-hmm.
So there's always a sense that, boy, this seems like a big idea, and it seems like if it took off, it could sell well. Like recently, the Pop It, not Bop It, but the Pop It Pro line that me and my partners created. We're doing a lot of extensions, but it was so successful that it's being knocked off. Like I've never seen a product knocked off as much as that product's being knocked off. And there are patents pending and all this, but it just shows that today that there's so many ways with all the online sales of things for companies to swoop in and try to get around patents and do everything, that it's a little bit discouraging. Like, wow, you get too successful and everyone just rips it off. So, on the money side, you're feeling like it's pretty hard to make money on ideas these days. So I do think passion and the fun of the people, pitching it to the companies that I like are really what makes it fun. And I just, as I said, I got a ton of ideas I've always been sort of noodling on over the years, and there's just no better feeling than getting one of them out there and having it somehow finally succeed. It feels like I've made an impact.
Okay. So Dan, one thing I want to tell you, we've been recording for about 28 minutes. My Zoom thing, since I don't have like Zoom Pro, we have remaining time left. It's like 9 minutes and 10 seconds. So if it ends, I may have to invite you again. Is that okay, Dan?
That's of course. Yeah.
I'm halfway done there, bro. Like I'm like really more than halfway done. I have 4 more questions before I get into my quick segment.
Perfect.
I want to know, how do I word this? Does it bother you that people only recognize you from Bop It? Because, bro, like your amazing brain has made so many like cool projects. Like I told my mom when I was interviewing him, like, hey, I'm interviewing Dan, the guy who made Bop It. And I told her some of the games you made. And I said Go-Go Worms. And she remembered that. She was like, what? Like, that's who you're interviewing? Like, I didn't know you made Go-Go Worms. So
that's funny.
Is it kind of annoying that people only recognize you from Bop It and not other inventions that you made?
It didn't happen by accident. I've been doing lots and lots of invention for years, and you just hope that a few of them take off. And I think it would bother me more if I didn't have a lot of other hits, that have sort of felt satisfying between, and a lot of things that maybe didn't sell financially as well, but just people love to play with
Mm-hmm.
a lot of games. But I am, I'm making an effort to, like 2 years ago, I was celebrating Bop-It's 25th anniversary and doing a lot of Bop-It stuff. And now I've been focusing on these other games, like this outdoor game, like I said, that I can't wait for that to launch. Got I've got 6 new games out this year. There's a Think Fun, which is the logic puzzle game. There's a game called Free Fall with them, which is like a really cool puzzle. It's almost like a mix of Perplexus and a logic puzzle. I've got a game called This Side Up with that's really cool. It looks like a package. It's an electronic game that tells you which side you have to flip the package, and it knows when you're touching it and when you let go of it. It's a really super fun, active game. That's with the English company. There's a game called the Pop-It line. We've got several things in the Pop-It Pro line now that light up, and you play that. That's become a big deal. There's a game called Taco Smash with Yulu. That is again, smaller companies, but really fun games that you. It's kind of like a really super fun family, almost like a family card game, with a really great mechanism where you smash the center of the sombrero and it flips all the tacos in the air. But the biggest one I think that's going to be really cool, and a lot of people are commenting already, is called Beat Blast. It's with Goliath Games. It's like a wand that has light streaming down the wand, and it plays a little bit like Guitar Hero, but in your hand, and you wave it in the air to sort of go through these sequences, sort of like a light up version of a Bop-It, if you think of it that way. But it's a really original idea. My partners and I worked on it very hard. That one's out. And there's a really cool game with Hasbro in sort of a very gamer division of them called Crystal Caper. It's like a very fun card game. I don't know if you ever played, if you played the card game Spoons, like these old games where, there's something in the center and everyone's playing, and then you got to grab the thing in the center before everyone else. It's a really fun party game. This game, I swear, anyone who gets it are going to play it constantly with their friends at parties. It's just a super fun card game. So I think I'm missing a couple more, but all of these are launching this year. They're all, really interesting, original games. None of them feel like derivatives of other things. So I guess that's the most satisfying thing is, I'm happy to have done Bop-It, but if people ask, it's really fun to show them all these other games, and it really, is satisfying to know that it certainly wasn't just far from being the only hit. But it's, it gave me encouragement to keep doing it, because it gave me enough success and enough connections and whatever, that it was possible to then have confidence to do more.
Okay. So before I get into my last 33 question segment, I want to know, Dan, have you ever seen the Disney movie called Meet the Robinsons?
Yeah.
So you've seen it. Okay, so for everybody listening, Meet the Robinsons is about a kid inventor. He's inventing a whole bunch of things.
Right.
I love that's to me the best Disney movie of all time, besides Finding Nemo. So the main message behind Meet the Robinsons is keep moving forward. So if you fail, just take it on the chin and keep it pushing. So I just want to tell you, Dan, I would love to see Meet the Robinsons Bop-It. I don't think you guys have that yet. I would love to see. I'm just putting that out there. I would love to see that. But
put it on the list.
For sure.
No, it's funny. That's a clever way to combine invention and Bop-It. I'll go watch that again.
I think I've seen somewhere, Dan, that you love to draw. You like drawing. So when can we see like an anime or a cartoon by Dan?
Oh, well, there's actually a website called Illustrated Travels, and those are most of my watercolor drawings, and they're really just like sketches of if you go, when I go to conferences or when my family goes on vacation, I'll do sort of sketch journals of the trip with notations and stuff like that. So it's mostly, some of it's pencil sketching, and some of it lately I've been just throwing some watercolor on it to give it color. And then I make these books afterwards for everyone who was with me on the trip, like, a hardcover printed book from Shutterfly. And so I like it. I love drawing just to draw. And I was never very good at drawing people, so I'm trying to draw the people that I meet on these, trips. Yeah, it's just a great hobby that I love to do.
I would love to see like a animation from you, Dan. I think that would be really cool.
Yeah,
I think the Bop It fans will support it as well.
yeah. I am working on some other Bop It, world type of things that have some animation. But yeah, for my drawing side, it's just kind of, I really like drawing on paper. I like the way pencil and paper go together. I do a lot of computer stuff, obviously, I've tried with Procreate to do sketching, and you can do it. It just doesn't. It's not really why I do it. When I I really need the real media on the paper, and I really like the way the water bleeds, and I like the way the pencils feel. It's like, even when I do something that looks great using a stylus on an iPad, it doesn't. I'm not that excited about doing it, so that's why I do it.
I understand that. Okay, so we're basically done with the interview. For everybody listening, we're basically done with the interview. This is my segment of the podcast called 33 Questions, where I ask the guests 33 random questions, and they have to answer it as quickly and as truthfully as possible. Are you ready, Dan?
Sure.
Question number 1. What logo did you have the most fun creating?
Logo. KID, my business card, Klitsner Industrial Design, kid.
What was young Dan's favorite thing to watch on TV as a child?
Lost in Space.
Bop It Smash or Bop It Tetris?
Bop It Tetris.
What's something you wish you would have invented?
I wish I had invented Skip It.
Hypothetically speaking, who would you want to help you in the midst of battle, Elon Musk or Nikola Tesla?
Well, Elon Musk is still alive, so I guess I'll choose.
That's valid. That's valid. Who do you think would have the most fun playing Bop It? SpongeBob, Jimmy Neutron, or Kramer from Seinfeld?
Kramer.
I love Kramer.
Because he would talk back to it.
What does the perfect dinner for Dan look like?
Well, my wife is an amazing cook and chef, and she makes me perfect dinners. During the pandemic, I had about 365 perfect dinners, so it'd be very hard for me to choose, but the perfect dinner is sitting outside in the backyard with my wife.
Okay. As an inventor, what's your worst fear?
Coming up with a great idea that's someone's already thought of.
No. On a scale 1 through 10, 1 being I'm not done, and 10 being I'm finished, what number best describes how you feel about continuing to make new iterations of Bop It?
I think I'm closer to done, but there's so much more that I'm working on. That's like, mentally I would be fine if I didn't do anything else, but I'd say it's more like, you say 10 means I've got more to do, and 1 means I'm finished.
1 being I'm not done, and 10 being I'm done.
10 being, I think it's probably closer to a 3.
Okay.
I have a lot more that I could do.
Okay.
Especially for charities.
If you could collab with any inventor, dead or alive, who would it be?
Steve Jobs.
Showers or baths?
Showers.
Microwave or the oven?
Microwave.
Describe your high school experience in 1 word.
Easy.
Black, white, or gray?
Black.
Name your top three comfort movies.
Guardians of the Galaxy, one. Uh, Princess Bride, and comfort movie. Oh, Tropic Thunder.
Oh my, that is amazing. I love Tropic Thunder. Would you rather have 10 big toes or 10 thumbs?
10 big toes or 10 thumbs?
Yeah.
Ugh. I think I'm gonna have to go with the toes.
Is there an invention that you regret making?
Yes.
What invention do you regret making?
Uh, I would say look at my wall here. I think it's the regret is a tough one. It's more, yeah, there just wasn't a very good use of materials. It's probably I don't regret it, but it was probably the sort of I would say it's the Wiggles guitar. Sort of overblown.
How would you like people to remember you?
A generous creator.
What's something you were afraid of as a child?
Authority.
What's your favorite fruit?
Yeah. Favorite fruit. You can tell I don't like fruit that much. I'd say pears.
How do you think the world can become a better place?
I think for people to know that no one group or person has all the answers.
What's something you do in your spare time when you're not inventing?
Tennis.
Oh, really? If you could be any insect, what would you be?
Insect, huh? I guess I would be a bee.
Yeah, that's my answer. Would you rather be a shoe or a sandal?
I'd rather be a sandal.
What are you eating for dinner tonight?
I have no idea.
What's the first song that comes to your mind?
You're just that's a tough one because I'm working on a bunch of songs with my band. I'd say the first one is we're working on now is "Forget You" by CeeLo Green.
Okay. What's your favorite part about doing interviews?
Getting to know the interviewer.
What invention do you wish was as successful as Bobbit?
A very obscure one called Mind Block.
Would you rather always laugh but be sad or always cry but be happy?
Well, I'd rather cry but be happy.
Favorite piece of clothing that you own?
I have a really soft shirt that I like to wear. I'm not sure who. I think it's I don't remember who makes it, but it's definitely my go-to.
For the very last question, without saying the location, what store do you shop to for groceries?
Without saying the location. What do you mean not a location?
Like
You
don't
mean
say, like don't say where it's at type of thing. Just what's the name of the store?
oh, I see. Um, there's a store called the Nugget. Or actually Trader Joe's probably hard to beat.
Yeah, Trader Joe's is amazing. So, for everybody listening, that was my 33 question segment. Dan, did you enjoy that? Was that weird? Did you enjoy that segment?
That's a little bit of pressure, but it was fun.
Yeah. Again, I'm like
Because
super.
you know when you things like that when you answer them, you know that you probably have a better answer that you just can't think of on the spot.
Mhm.
But in general, it's fun.
Yeah, I love because again, I'm like super big into psychology, and that's why I added that segment. I just feel like the weirdest questions and how somebody will answer tells you a lot about a person. It's just off the top of their dome, you know.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's just it is one of those. there's a fear of not nailing your, like spacing out on or blacking out on something
Mm-hmm.
that just doesn't come to your mind. I'm not a fast thinker. Well, I can be very fast on certain opinions and ideas, but I like to spend a lot of time thinking about answers. So that's a very big challenging game for me.
To build off of that, you said you like to think a lot about your answers. Do you also think a lot before you act, like before you do something? Do you think about it thoroughly?
No,
No.
I don't. Unfortunately, I'd say I'm pretty impulsive in action, but if writing a letter or giving an opinion or doing something in writing,
Mm-hmm.
I definitely like it's. I spend a lot of time crafting it, but I enjoy it, like writing a script for something or doing whatever the things that take a lot of thought. I like it when you get them right. Uh, Now I just have to, I've used Chat GPT once, and I'm kind of scared of what that means because now I can just write down my thoughts and it'll do the rest. So
Yeah, ChatGPT is a very interesting product. It's so crazy how far AI has became. It's kind of mind-boggling, kind of.
that's and we're at the we're at a very early stage. So
Yeah, which is even scarier because, geez. So before I end the interview, Dan, I actually have a question from one of my buddies named John Walter, who he's also an inventor. He created something called True Mirror, and True Mirror is supposed to be, dang, I don't want to butcher this. I'm sorry, John, but it's supposed to be a mirror to where when you look into the mirror, it shows you your true self. The mirrors that we use every single day, they're kind of it's inverted, so everything is black backwards. Everything is flipped. So like how if you wear a graphic T-shirt and you look at yourself in the mirror, the words are going to be backwards. So John created a mirror to where it shows you basically your true self and how you truly look and how other people see you. So John's
oh
question,
that, oh yeah, it's I think is that something on is it a real mirror or is it something digital?
oh no, it's a real mirror.
Hmm.
I'll probably send you the link after. It's super cool.
I think I've heard about it or seen something. It sounds familiar.
Now, I wanted John to ask you a question coming from an inventor to another inventor. I thought that would be cool. His question was, how do you manage Project Titus? Like, how do you deal with, I guess, too many good ideas to pursue already with a full
Yeah,
plate?
not very well. Um, I I deal with it by making all my life. I've made sure to get good partners to help me with that because I would gladly give up, income, profit, whatever, to be happy. And I'm such a bad. I mean, I can I can do that work, and I used to do it when I was sort of starting out, and I had all sorts of other projects and inventions, and I was working graphic design and illustration. Like when before I just committed full time to toy invention, and I managed a lot of that really well, but it took so much time. And so I think I've found that now I really excel at creating and at pitching ideas. So the project management, I can only say, is luckily due to having Brian and Gary, my partners, who are very good at that, who work with me. So that's a cheap answer. But personally, yeah, like managing time around the house, it's got to be everything goes in the calendar, predict it. Like I think the system of knowing what you want to do first and then how much time it takes and then when do you do it. And I used to do it with sticky notes. I came up with
Hmm.
this system many years ago where every time I had something, a task, an idea, I'd write it on a sticky note, put it on the wall, but I would make the sticky note the size of the task. So if it was a short task, it would be a small note. If it was a big task, it'd be a big note. And it was such that you could sort of say, well, I can only fit on a day on the calendar, on this big calendar, on one day, I'm only going to be able to fit a certain amount of tasks. So if it was a big task, I would just sort of know, well, that's going to take, I'd put it on the calendar and it took up half the day. and then you'd slide in a few small tasks. So I really broke it down granularly into, you know, what, how long is the task and when do you do it? That doesn't have anything to do with how much fun is the task, which is really what I end up doing first anyway. So, so it's but it's always been fascinating to me is that whole question of project management, how to really get done. And I've done talks, you know, on this RITE thing, which is making sure that you're accounting for, you know, all the things that when you come up with an idea, that it's not just the idea. How do you evaluate which idea you should pursue, which one has the best chance of success? That's, you know, I think what you might be referring to is you have too many options. Well, how do you decide? So a decision tree, you know, trying to really make sure you're spending your time for success, or, you know, or you can just spend your time on the things that give you the most joy and hope it works out. So I think that's maybe a good way to for people to ponder.
Okay. So everybody, this was the Dan Klitsner interview from Bop It. This was super, super cool. I want to give a huge shout out to my buddy Kane and one of his buddies from the Bop It Riff, Sam. They helped me a lot for research for this interview. I just want to thank them a lot dearly. I actually reached out to them to help me with information and just finding new things. I think Kane has he has a website called Bop It of the Internet where he just talks about a whole bunch of obscure facts about Bop It. So Dan, before we end the interview,
yeah, he knows more. He knows more about Bop It than I do.
I want to say, is there anything that people may not know about Bop It that you kind of want to let them know, or?
I think, boy, I've sure talked a lot about Bop It over the years that you may not know. There's plenty of versions and ideas and things, you know, that never have seen the light of day and may not. There's lots and lots of variations on Bop It that, you know, I've thought of, or my team has thought of, that again, just because you haven't seen them doesn't mean they weren't thought of or considered. So there's lots of things like that people don't know, you know, the depth of it. But I think the most obscure thing about Bop It today that people may not know, this is, you know, I don't know if we talked about this in our first interviews, but how it's affected pop culture is so beyond the game, and especially music. I think I'm most fascinated by how it's appeared. If you search Bop It on Spotify, you'll find it in it. You know, at first it was 20 songs, 30 songs, 40 songs, 50 songs. It's just become part of music. This whole I'm just amazed by it. So those are the kind of things. And especially the other thing, people like who had a Bop It when in 1999 or 2000 most of them have no idea that there's been so many other versions that I've worked on over 25 years or anything new. They only know, and so that they think, like I just saw a blog something today, someone like, do they still make Bop Its? Like some guys who are like 30 years old. So, you know, I think it's sort of what's interesting about it is that it's lasted, and yet it can be different things for different people, you know. And so when you ask what anything people don't know, it's kind of like, well, a lot of people, depending on who you are and what your age is, aren't aware, maybe rather of how much more to the story there is. And you know, that's why I think it's probably most interesting about it is how this thing, you know, somehow is so unique that it's been spoofed so much, and in songs and all these things how could I ever have predicted or expected that? You know, it isn't so much about its success, it's integration into history and pop culture. It's something I still sort of wonder, how did that happen? And it's cool, you know. But so I don't know if that answers the question in terms of some little hidden fact. I'm sure there's plenty, but to me, that's the bigger picture. Is usually when people besides Kane Kaiser, who knows a lot, most people have no idea how widespread or deep it goes into pop culture, and it's always fun to kind of see them discover that.
Yeah, I mean, dude, what you have created over the years, even outside of Bop It, it's amazing, man. Like I would love to see like a documentary about your life and your come up, and not only making Bop It, but even like the stuff that people don't know, like the rejected ideas that you probably never even spoke about. Like I think that it would just be inspiring to a lot of people. And there's only so much that an interview can capture. Like I feel like there's a lot more that can be captured like within a movie or a documentary. So I would love to see, Dan Klitsner documentary bopping into history. You know what I'm saying? I think that would be cool.
Maybe someday. You got it. I've looked into it. There has been people who've been wanting to do different versions of it, and I think it would be interesting if it answered a lot of questions for people in general who are creative. And there's some there's I think it will happen someday. It just depends on the right people getting involved, and it'll be a lot of work because I have a lot of stuff to go through. Luckily, I've saved a lot of it, so we'll see. But I'm conscious of things like that being one, entertaining and relevant and interesting, not ego. I don't need to be recognized for it. I think it's fun. I think it's a personal journey or discovery of how did this happen, and kind of getting a perspective on that. But so that's why it would have to have a lot of humor, have to have a style to it, to me, that was fitting. Like I wouldn't want it to be too serious. So I have a lot of thoughts on that. Maybe someday it'll happen.
Okay. You guys heard it here first, man. Dan Klitsner documentary bopping into history. But Dan, before we go, is there anything you want to say to the people listening? Any upcoming projects you want to talk to them about?
No, I just think enjoy playing games and have fun and stay inventive. Keep your mind alert. Ask a lot of questions. Don't take yourself too seriously. I don't know. What did I miss? And I wanted to say I really appreciate your your thoughtful questions and your research that you've done, to be prepped. And I wish you well in all of your research in psychology and what you're doing, and admire that you took the time to do this and other interviews and your podcast. So thank you for your effort, and I can't wait. Let me know when this is available.
Oh man, I appreciate that a lot, Dan. This will probably come out maybe sometime next month. I have a lot of interviews I need to edit that's in the vault. This is for sure coming out sometime next month. This is super cool, man. This is really, I'm kind of fanboying. It's super cool that I got to, I'm talking to Dan, bro. Like this is Dan I'm talking to, bro. I just interviewed Dan, bro. Oh, man.
Well, I'm glad you like it. And again, thanks again. And I look forward, I'm sure we'll be in touch when you're ready.
And so for everybody listening, this is the Dan Klitsner interview. I am Make Love of Obscure Image podcast, the most obscure podcast in the world, where I interview game inventors, underground artists, game developers, and anything in between that. This is cool, man. It's your boy, man.
Okay. Here we go. I swear to God, we're wasting time. See, you give me faith that everything be fine, but I'm losing my mind. And you say smell the roses, what happens, we'll be fine. Okay, I just hate the fact that we all wait to see